I wanna be like you. 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 Welcome to another episode of I Wanna Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes. Okay, I'm cutting straight to the chase, all right? I'm cutting this intro short, okay? No bits, no funny business, okay? Because today, as I'm sure you noticed, our episode's a little lengthy. Our episode is the longest episode we have ever done, and it's because the guest today warrants that length. Today, we are privileged to have a Broadway legend on, Roy Reams. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Roy Reams originated the part of Billy in 42nd Street. Roy Reams was in the original cast of Sweet Charity with Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon. Okay, well, Bob Fosse wasn't in it, but he choreographed it, of course, and he gets to talking all about that. Roy Reams played the first openly gay part on Broadway ever. Okay, last week, you know, we had Sean McManus on, and he talked about Patti LuPone's I Want to Be Like You being Ethel Merman. Yeah, well, Roy Reams spent time with Ethel Merman, okay? So I want to cut straight to the chase. We are privileged to introduce you. Today, I want to be like Roy Reams.
Glorious. Well, and the choreography really fit the style, and the dancers were exceptional.
They were. I think that what's interesting too about that show is that you had this like Cuban rich style to it, but then they did moments of interpretive dance that were, I mean, I shouldn't even say interpretive because you're not really interpreting it. They're giving you the story, but it's like happening simultaneously through dance, which Justin Peck is just, I mean, he's the king of that right now, you know. So
I've loved everything that he's done.
Yeah, me too.
I do not know him.
Yeah.
I don't have to know him, but I like his work in the theater.
Yeah, for sure. Illinois too. I mean, that was brilliant.
Well, it got the year for the Cheetah Rivera Awards. It got the best ensemble.
It did, and it won best choreo. He won best choreo.
No,
the Tonys.
He didn't. Oh, on the Tonys, yes.
The Tonys,
but not the Cheetah Rivera, because I voted for him. I wanted him that year. I thought that was the best choreography. But you know, they always want to spread the wealth. So when you have a committee of people, well, you know, this year we didn't have, we need to have a woman choreographer win this year. No, we need to vote for the best person. But you go through that
all the time.
Every time.
So what won best choreo last year? I can't remember at the Cheetah Rivera Awards.
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think now. What did win? Was it?
Was it Hell's Kitchen?
Well, I can't remember whether it was that or Outsiders or one of those.
Yeah, Hell's Kitchen or Outsiders probably.
I can't remember now which one won the choreography.
Yeah.
But no, I'm a big fan of his. Not that I didn't think the other people were good. They were, but you forced me to pick one, and I would have picked that.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
And because I also think that I don't know Justin. I don't know his work. And I think his wife was the co-choreographer of Buena Vista.
Oh, wow.
But what he does is that he gives us a style of dance that seems to fit the piece. And so I think he's terrific.
Yeah.
Now wherever Justin Peck is, he needs to take me out to dinner and buy me a drink.
Yeah, I think so. We'll be tagging him in that on Instagram, huh? Okay, welcome to another episode of I Want to Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes. Today, I want to be like Roy Reams. Roy, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure, and I'm fascinated to find out what you're going to ask, and I also will be fascinated with what I'm going to answer.
Oh, we have done. Me too. Well, we have so many questions, and it is just such a joy and pleasure to have you here. I think everyone who I've told that you were coming on has been like, how did you? Oh my gosh, I can't wait. You know, he has all these stories. We are so excited for your show, your 54 Below show, which I'm going to ask you about. We're going to go see it next week.
Oh, please.
We just
put on your cross or your mezuzah when you come, because I tell about all my sex stories.
We'll be there.
And I also have photos.
Oh,
so,
boy.
You know, if you don't know who they are, you'll be able to see what they look like.
Right, yeah. Okay,
and I use explicit language, which I won't do now.
Hey, listen, you can. Feel free. Feel free. Okay, so we ask the same first question every time. Because the podcast is called I Want to Be Like You, we ask, who was your I Want to Be Like You when you were a kid?
Very easy. Gene Kelly.
Gene Kelly.
Yeah. I was a kid growing up in Covington, Kentucky. And I grew up, my family's origins are farmers in Kentucky, and my dad came to Covington, became a conductor on the L&N Railroad, and married my mother, and they popped out 7 children.
Wow.
And I was the last, and my mother always used to say, I have 3 boys, 3 girls, and Leroy. And so I was indulged. As a kid, I was the baby. And my brothers were older. And as a matter of fact, my eldest brother could have possibly fathered me because he was of an age that he could have done that.
Wow.
So I only grew up with my sister, Marcella, who's only 16 months older, and then our sister, Betty, who's 10 years older.
Yeah.
So I grew up with my two sisters, basically. My brothers were there for a short time, but, they were men. They were in the war, and they did all those things, and all they wanted to do was drink beer, go out and get laid, so.
What'd you say?
Just move the mic down, it's covering your face a little bit.
Oh, yeah, sure. Right here is good?
Yep.
Okay, great.
So that's what they did, and just to give you the background, and I was a kid who should have grown up liking either country western music or rock and roll. I grew up in the 50s, so I should have loved Elvis Presley and Bill Haley and I didn't. I liked Ella Fitzgerald singing George and Ira Gershwin songs.
Wow.
That's where my taste was, and I would go see the movies, because in Covington, going out, a big deal was going to have a hamburger or a bowl of chili. And we had 4 movie theaters, so our entertainment were the movies.
Yeah.
And so we would go to the movies all the time because we could afford it. And we didn't have a class system in Covington. Everybody was of the same, caliber as far as money was concerned. So we didn't grow up with that kind of competition. So we went to the movies, and of course, what did I respond to? The MGM movie musicals.
Right.
Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire, #1 in every category. He was a genius. But I liked Gene Kelly's physical dance ability, his athletic quality, and also I thought he was a sexy guy. Mm-hmm. And come to find out, Gene Kelly and I have the same birthday, August 23rd, the first day of Virgo.
Wow.
And I met him when he came to see 42nd Street. And he came backstage, and I said, Mr. Kelly, before I open my mouth, I'm going to make a fool out of myself because you're my idol. I grew up, you were my inspiration, I want to be you. And I said, I'm just overwhelmed meeting you. And I said, we're both Irish. My mother was a Moor, and my dad had a McNew on his mother's side, so I have Scot-Irish blood. That's me. And I said, so we have a lot in common. And he looked at me and said, well, kid, I'll tell you, you certainly sing a hell of a lot better than Fred and I ever could. That was my compliment.
Oh, my gosh.
And in those days, we didn't have cell phones and picture taking and all of that. But I did ask him for an autographed picture, and he sent it.
Oh, wow.
And when I was in L.A. doing 42nd Street, I never got to see Fred Astaire, but I had an address for him. And I knew Ginger Rodgers, who was incredible.
Yeah.
And so she had signed a couple pictures for me, so I got some pictures of Fred Astaire, and I sent them to his home address. And they sent them back, and all he did was sign the signature, or somebody did. Who knows? Yeah. But he didn't say to Leroy, except for the ones from Ginger, which he signed below. Wow. So I sent them back and said, I'm so sorry, would you mind? And the envelope was sent back to me with a stamp that said, received, not open, return. So I never got to meet him, but Fred Astaire, my God, a genius. He was the best dancer, man, woman, or animal. I mean, he was just, the style and his interpretation was just incredible.
No one like him.
Yeah. And also Eleanor Powell. Oh, my God. The best tap dancer in the world.
What did Gene Kelly think of 42nd Street?
He never said, and I didn't ask.
Uh-huh.
I assume he liked it.
Yeah.
But just to jump back about dancers, I did get to dance with Ann Miller.
Yes, right, of
course.
And
and she was a wonderful human being, and we became buddies and friends. I also danced with Sid Charisse.
Yes, yeah.
I did her first television special.
Crazy.
And she was incredible. One of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life, and her legs. But my first audition, first job in New York was Juliet Prowse Nightclub act. And Juliet Prowse had undoubtedly the most gorgeous legs you've ever seen in your life. They were a mile high. She gorgeous.
Yeah.
Just absolutely gorgeous. So, and also I danced with Ginger Rodgers. I held her in my arms and we did a little dance. And of course I danced with Gwen Verdon. You name them. All the people down the list. Rita Moreno, Anne Reinking, Donna McKechnie. Let's name the dancer. I've held them. Yeah, if you only knew what these hands have held. If you only knew what these hands have held.
Well, so what got you into musical theater? In terms of, were you doing it in high school? Were you?
No, God touched me and said, this boy is a song and dance man. When I was a kid in Kentucky, when music was on, I was in the middle of the floor carrying on. And I used to get all the kids in the neighborhood, and I get on the side porch and make them sit down, and I get up and perform for them. And that's why my mother sent me to dancing school. And I mean, this is the true story. In the Kentucky Post, there was an ad, a local dance teacher named Jules Stein. Jules Stein, he obviously must have been Jewish. And he had a dance school at 808 Scott Hall in Covington. So I went there at 6 years of age. Now, he didn't teach the little kids. He had younger girls who taught the kids. But we got to be in the recital. That was the big deal. And the ad said, you know, they taught tap-toe ballet, acrobatic baton ballroom, voice personality, and culture. That's what the sign said. And you would be in the recital. And they gave you a free pair of tap shoes. So that's how I got started. And after that recital, he hung himself. Had nothing to do with me. The man hung himself. It's a true story.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so then, just a block from our house up the alley, a young man in Covington, Kentucky named Bobby Ziegler opened up a dance school. He was 18 years old. And he opened up the school, and I went there. It was just a block away from my house. But then he got drafted into the Army. And his teacher, Alma Tranter, came in to take over the school for him while he was in the service. And I was in my age group, and when she saw me, she told my mother, she said, he's got it. He's a natural. So she took me out of that class and put me in an advanced class with older kids.
Wow.
And she told my mother, she said, I want to give him a solo number in the show. And we couldn't afford for solo less. She said, no, I don't want pay. I want to give him. So she was the first person who validated my talent. And she told my mother, she said, I would not tell you this, but he has it, and he can be a professional, and he can have a living doing this. He's that good.
Wow.
So that began. And then when Bobby came back from the service, he put me back in my age group. So we left him and went to another teacher that Alma Tranter had done. And I went to all the dance teachers in Covington, Kentucky, and Cincinnati, Ohio. I went on both sides of the river.
Were you doing all of it? You were doing jazz, tap?
Yeah, all of it.
All of it.
All of it. As a matter of fact, when I started out in the class, the girl who taught the ballet, she said, we're going to start on point class next week. So I went out and got toe shoes.
Wow.
And we didn't think a thing about it. It's so funny. I think about that. And they were pink. My mother said, oh, we should dye those black. And she got some shoe polish. And I worked on point for a little while. And then when Mrs. Tranter came in to teach, she was surprised when she said, we got ready for point class, and I had my point shoes on. And then she said, no, well, you don't have to do that anymore. You just have to wear ballet shoes. But yeah, it's strange how it happens.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's amazing. So you went to CCM for college. What was the experience like? I mean, now, right, of course, the college audition experience is its own business, culture, the whole nine. But from what I understand, CCM barely had a musical theater program back then, right?
Well, I'll tell you the whole story. When I was a senior in high school, and I'd gone to all the dance schools, tap-toe, ballet, I did it all. And that summer, the Cincinnati Zoo Opera, the ballet company that danced in the operas there, were auditioning people.
Yeah.
Now, everyone laughs when I say the zoo, but the pavilion was an open-air pavilion with a roof in the middle of the zoo.
Yeah.
And all of the stars from the Metropolitan Opera came there and sang in the summer. Alicia Albanese, Anna Moffo, Jan Pierce, all the big stars came there. It was a big deal in Cincinnati. And everyone dressed at night. Of course, it was funny because while the opera's going on, all the animals were going in the background. But
You're in the middle of the zoo.
It was a big thing in Cincinnati.
Oh my gosh.
And I was then 17. I turned 18 that summer because I graduated early because of my being born in August. And there was a young girl in the corps, the ballet, who was 14 years old. And her name was Susie Ficker. And so she said to me, we became friendly, and she said, would you like to come to my school, College Conservatory of Music, and study ballet? And I said, well, that would be great, but I can't afford lessons. You know, we don't have the money to do that. And she said, well, I can get you a scholarship. And I said, well, what do I have to do? She said, no. She said, Marion LaCour, our teacher, comes to the opera, and she'll see you dance. And indeed, Marion LaCour came back and offered me a scholarship, ballet scholarship at CCM. It was not part of the university then. This is 1960.
Okay.
It was a separate school.
Okay.
A College Conservatory of Music was separate from the University of Cincinnati. Now, the University of Cincinnati had a theater arts major, which is why I went there. I couldn't have afforded to go away to school, but I could commute from Covington, it's just across the river. So I was a theater arts major at the University of Cincinnati, and I studied dance and I studied voice at the College Conservatory of Music. I had opera teachers.
Wow.
So I was lucky.
Yeah.
And then my junior year, they joined the faculty of the University of Cincinnati. And CCM was the first college to offer a musical theater major.
Okay.
A musical theater. They were the first ones to have that
Right.
in the whole United States.
Wow.
And
Oh my
Pamela
gosh.
Myers, who's a dear friend from company and all of that, is a close friend. She was the first musical theater major in the United States and the first one to graduate as a musical theater major.
Wow.
And I graduated as a theater arts major.
Okay.
But then when I got my master's, it was under the musical theater department, and then I got the first honorary doctorate in the musical theater program.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm very proud of that.
Yeah,
So
right,
it's a
of course.
prestigious,
Yeah,
thing.
of course.
And I was just at the right time at the right place.
Right.
And when Marion LaCour retired, Tatiana Grantseva of the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo took over the ballet, and she was incredible. And I studied with her for 2 years. I went to ballet class every day.
Oh wow.
And I was a very strong dancer. That's why. And then during the breaks in school, I would go and do summer stock. And that's how I got my equity card.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
And then my last 2 years at college, because of my professor, he let me do the shows, all the musicals. We did more musicals. When I first went there, we did one musical a year. My last 2 years, we did a couple, 2 to 3, because of me. And I directed them, I choreographed them, I also played the lead. But they gave me that opportunity, and I danced with the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra.
Right.
So I performed a lot, and I was square danced on the Midwestern Hayride in Cincinnati, at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee, and on the Indiana Hoedown in Indianapolis.
Oh, my
and my
gosh.
mother, God bless her, saved all those $5 and $10 bills I made, and that's what paid for my college education.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I just had a very smart mother, and I was in a venue where I got good training. So when I came to New York, I was ready to go. I had my equity card. And
Do you remember what theater it was that you got your equity card at?
Yes, it was 1961.
Wow.
1961 I got
What was
my
the
equity.
show? Do you remember?
Well, it was a whole season.
It was a whole season.
It was a whole season.
Okay.
The first show we did was Showboat. The second show was Damn Yankees with Rita Moreno, who had just won the Oscar for West Side Story. And I did the Who's Got the Pain when they do the mambo. Who's Got the Pain?
Yeah, of course.
And I danced, and we remained friends all this time.
Wow.
And Jane Powell came and did Most
So
Happy Fella.
what theater did she come? What theater did she do? What theater was this?
Well, it was an auditorium in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember the Civic Auditorium. It had a name, but I don't remember.
Okay,
what the
okay,
name
I
was.
see. So she wins the Oscar for West Side Story, and then comes to do Damn Yankees. Oh my
Well,
goodness.
the reason being
Yeah.
is that she got booked before she won the Oscar.
Okay,
Had she won the Oscar,
okay.
you think she was going to go to Dayton, Ohio? But she was already signed. That's why she came.
I see. I see.
You know, she was under obligation.
Oh
And,
my goodness.
She's, I mean, look at her.
Yeah.
90-something years old, like a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just sing, dance, act, she can do it all.
Yeah,
And
she really
She's
can.
also a survivor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, knowing her story, what she went through, and Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, she survived that.
Yeah,
And,
right.
So, she's just, but she has that joie de vivre about life.
Yeah.
She's a survivor and a delightful human being.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Mm.
So you said, what year did you come to New York?
In 1965, the beginning of 1965.
Okay.
I graduated in 64, and I had to get money to come to New York.
Yeah.
So I was a secretary for a piping contractor. I screwed that up, and he fired me as he should have. And then I was a substitute English teacher.
Oh.
And I did all the schools in Covington and Cincinnati. I couldn't sign a year's contract because I wanted to come to New York. So as soon as I saved up $500, and I wanted to spend Christmas and New Year's with my family.
Right.
And then the beginning of January, my professor from school drove me to New York.
No way. I mean, it's kind of amazing how set up you were throughout college and how much you worked throughout college to be able to graduate college and then move to New York, because so many people aren't able to do that even now.
Well,
you know.
but I've known since I was 6 years old what I was going to do.
Right.
But I was smart enough to know, and I was, in the upper 10% of the class and stuff. I was a good student.
Yeah.
And I went to my high school time was spent in the commercial department, meaning bookkeeping, shorthand, typing, because I wanted to learn something to do in case I had to work when I wasn't in between.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have a craft. Thank God I never had to use it. But so I was prepared to come to New York, and I wanted to be on Broadway.
Yeah.
I would buy all the albums and lay in the living room listening to all of them and reading the names on the record album, wanting to be there.
Yeah.
And a longer story, there was a wonderful actress named Marcia Lewis, who has since passed on. And she came to the University of Cincinnati, and my sophomore year, I was already vice president of the Mummers Guild. I rose very quickly. And Marcia was a registered nurse who came back to get her nursing degree.
Okay.
And she worked in the health center, and they paid her, and that's how she was going to school. And when I was going down to the Mummers Guild office, she used to wait outside. Finally, I said, where? She said, well, I'm thinking of joining. I said, well, come in, we need the help. So we became buddies. And then she started acting in the shows, and she got the bug. So the year I graduated, she still had another year to go. She decided not to go back to school and come to New York. And so she immediately got a job because she was a registered nurse at the Mount Sinai Hospital. And she had a lovely apartment there that she had to share with another nurse on 96th and Park. So when I came up to New York with my professor, I had a place to stay. Now, they didn't allow you to stay there, but, we did. I did.
Sure.
And so, I slept in her bed at night because she did the night shift. And then she would come in the morning, I'd get out of bed, and she'd get in. The bed was never cold. And so that's how, that's how we did as college kids. We had the jumping stone. And then my first audition, first job, Juliet Prowse, and that was it. And we played the Persian Room at the Plaza Hotel.
Oh, my goodness.
And I had a room at the Plaza Hotel. I didn't know what the Plaza Hotel was. An old hotel with crystal chandeliers. What did I know? I'm from Kentucky.
Yeah.
So here I have a room at the Plaza. And so when people would ask me, they would say, where are you staying? And I say, oh, I'm at the Plaza. So I got the reputation that I was this little rich Southern kid who came to New York, and his mommy and daddy put him up at the Plaza while he was trying to get into show business, which was not true, but that was it. And I didn't know what the Plaza Hotel was.
Right, of course.
So, you think about all of that.
Yeah.
Now, this is an interesting story. I'll make it longer, and then you can edit.
Sure.
But at the audition, I wore ballet tights because I didn't have dance pants. I didn't sell them in Covington, Kentucky.
Yeah.
So I came in ballet tights. And my first audition, first job, I picked up backstage in show business as with the casting newspapers. And it said, Juliet Prowse Nightclub act, one dancer needed, must be 6 feet tall. I'm 5'11", but if I stand straight, I'm 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
And, being attractive and sing and dance. So I went to the audition, and Ernie Flatt was the choreographer who had done the Gary Moore show. This was before the Carol Burnett Show.
Oh.
And so he was an established choreographer. And at the audition, Juliet Prowse's manager, Mark Mordo, kept looking at me going, and I thought, I'm going to have to put out to get the job. and made me very nervous. And so after the audition, Ernie said, now, some of you will be called back tomorrow, and if you get the call to come back, come prepared to start rehearsal, because Juliet will pick and you will start rehearsal immediately.
Yeah.
So, of course, I was called back, and only 2 of us were called back. And the other guy was like 6'2". I thought, well, he's going to get the job because he's taller.
Yeah.
But, and of course, we're auditioning, and of course, Mark Mordo's still going. So I got the job.
Oh, my God.
And so Mark came up, and he said to Juliet, hey, Juliet, can I take the kid out for breakfast? And I thought, I'm not going to put out the, so I'm taking this. I said, no, thank you very much. I'm here to rehearse. Mr. Flatt said I'm here. So Julie said, no, you can take him out.
Oh, boy.
And then once we sat down to breakfast, I knew he wasn't gay by the way he ate. So I thought, well, I'm safe on that stand. And then he said, I guess you were wondering why I kept winking at you. I said, yeah. He said, I knew when you walked into the room that Juliet was going to pick you. He said, I knew you were the one. And then I thought, now I know what it is. Now he's going to try to get me for a cheap price. But don't mess with me, mister, because I belong to Actors Equity, which had nothing to do with that. That wasn't their union. But I thought, and I know what the equity salary was. The minimum was $125 a week. So I thought, I'm not moving here till I get a $125 a week salary. So he said, well, when we start out, you'll get $350 a week, and when we get to Vegas, you'll make $400 a week. I almost fell off the stool. And so that's how I started out. I was making 3 times the money Broadway dancers were making.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
so when Juliet's act ended, I came back to New York. I pick up backstage and show business. The casting is there. Sweet Charity, Bob Fosse, Gwen Verdon.
Yeah.
Auditioning. So again, on my ballet tights, I go to the audition. And while we're auditioning, Bob Fosse was paying no attention to me whatsoever.
He was in the room for the audition.
Oh, we gave the audition.
Wow.
And of course, I'm in ballet tights because he thought I was a ballet dancer. But Gwen was watching me. And in those days, singers didn't really dance and dancers didn't really sing.
Oh.
And, it was later that they started doing that when they started shrinking the cast.
Oh.
And so I was a studied singer. So then when I sang, Cy Coleman, the composer, jumped up and ran over to the desk. And I thought, well, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
But Bob Fosse wasn't buying me. And so then we had to audition for small parts in the show.
Okay.
And I was auditioning with Miguel Hedro, who was Puerto Rican,
Okay.
to play a very small part called Young Spanish Man.
Yes.
And I thought, well, this is how he wants to get rid of me, because the other kid's Puerto Rican and I'm an Irish kid from Kentucky, although I had dark hair then. And but I had studied, Spanish, so I could say, "Señorita, señorita, she's drowning in the lake." I could do that
Yeah.
better than Miguel.
Sure.
And so that's how I was cast.
Oh my gosh, that's
So I got
funny.
Sweet Charity,
Yeah.
and God, did I learn a lot from that.
I was
show.
gonna say, so this is your Broadway debut. This is the
Yeah.
dream.
And we reopened the Palace Theater, which
Oh.
was in a movie house.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we reopened it as a legitimate house. So very exciting.
And this was 66.
1966.
So tell me a little bit
But
about.
then the thing was, once the show opened, Juliet Prowse asked me to come back and do her act. So I handed in my notice opening night.
No way.
And Bob Fosse came in the next day and accosted me in the dressing room and said, "I'd like to know why you handed in your notice. You know how many dancers want to work for me? Now you give me one damn reason why you're leaving the show." Well, so Juliet Prowse pays me $400 a week and you pay me $125. And he said, well, I said, well, neither can I. I'm a show whore. Whoever pays the most gets me. So I went back with Juliet. And then
Wow.
Tony Sharmely, who was my favorite choreographer, I adored him, was doing the Danny Kaye TV show.
Uh-huh.
And so he asked me to stay in California and do the Danny Kaye show. So I was there for a couple of years doing all of those musical variety shows, dancing with all the stars and all of that. And the last TV show, and I worked all the time, sometimes I did 2 shows a week. The last TV show I did was the Carol Burnett Show.
I was gonna say but before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit more about Sweet Charity because tell me a little bit about what that experience was like. You're putting on an original production of Sweet Charity with Bob Fosse, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Bob Fosse is Bob Fosse at this point. Am I right?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about what it was like working with him, especially with Gwen, being the lead, because there's so much.
The way Bob choreographed, he had like a question mark posture. And to do his work, you had to get into that posture and
Right.
then, do what he did.
Right.
And when we got ready to do the Frug number, of course, he
Yes.
smoked. And he would have a cigarette in his mouth during rehearsal. And it would burn down and burn his lip. And he'd go like that, put another cigarette in. And he died of lung cancer. Hey, in a heart condition, please.
Right.
But he was a genius. And he didn't really like me because he thought I was a ballet dancer. And I wasn't. I tap danced, I did jazz.
Right.
But Gwen liked me. And so when we started the Frug, he wanted everybody smoking because he smoked.
Right.
And I
right.
said, I'm not going to smoke. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I don't smoke and I'm not going to learn. And he said, well, I guess you don't have to light your cigarette. Everyone else will, though. So, then we get out of town. And during rehearsal, he didn't look at me much. Gwen did. She liked me.
Yeah.
So we go to Philadelphia and we had our first public performance. This is a true story. I'm bragging, but it's a true story. And so we do our first preview, and at intermission, he came into the dressing room, the boys' dressing room, and he said, looked at me and he said, what were you doing out there tonight? And I thought, this is it. He's going to fire me because he's never liked me. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, the way you performed. You never did that in rehearsal. My God, you came out. I couldn't keep my eyes off of you tonight. You were out there. He said, I said, well, you never asked me to perform in rehearsal. And so then I became a favorite.
Right.
And after me leaving Charity on Broadway, I thought he would never hire me again because I handed him my notice, but he did.
Right.
He asked me to do the film, and I was asked to dance with Gwen and Buddy Vest. We did a trio number on a Bob Hope special, and it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's called Cool Hand Luke. And then the Little Spanish Flea we did, and it was choreographed on us, and I was in a room with Bob Fosse, Gwen, Verdon, Buddy Vest, and the pianist. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. And during rehearsal, good story, when we were in rehearsal doing Sweet Charity, on the breaks, the kids would go out and smoke. I would go into the room where Gwen and Bobby were rehearsing because I wanted to study them.
Yeah.
And they never said I couldn't be there.
Right.
So I would just sit there and watch them. And I remember one day, Bob did a step, and then Gwen did a step. And he said, I don't know whether any of this shit is any good. He said, on you, everything looks good. And it did.
Yeah.
He would do something, and when she did it, it was better.
Yeah.
Because Gwen Verdon danced with her face, not just her body. She was a genius, really.
Yeah.
And so I studied them, and I remember one day she started crying, and she said, Bobby, please don't make me sing that song, Where Am I Going? Because she said, I'm not a singer. And he said, of course she did, but on matinee day she used to cut it. And she was insecure about that.
Wow.
And of course, I was in the background saying, let me sing it. I love to sing it.
But so she would cut the song from during matinees?
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah.
Wow.
'Cause she didn't like, having to sing,
Yeah.
But she was absolutely brilliant. And you can't appreciate it until you see her in a live theater. The same thing with Ethel Merman.
Yeah.
You see films of Ethel Merman, and they go, what is the big deal? You had to see them in a theater.
Yeah.
And Merman just defined the belter and changed the sound of musical comedy, musical theater. She did.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who debate about her acting ability, and she wasn't indulgent as an actress. She came out and just, rah, rah, rah. I always said she's like a barking dog.
Yeah, right.
She came on stage, she go, rah, 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 rah. And then came time for the song, she'd walk and plant the feet, and then that voice was like a trumpet.
Yeah, right.
There are many voices in the theater, and now, of course, all the kids belt like crazy.
Yeah, right.
The kids are sensational now.
Yeah.
But Ethel was the first.
Yeah.
And you understood every word that she sang and said on stage, and I only saw her do the revival of Dolly. I never got to see her do Gypsy.
Right.
But I got to see Dolly, and she was an incredible presence in a theater.
Can I ask, when in regards to Sweet Charity, were a lot of the dancers Bob Fosse dancers in the sense where they already knew the style, they've been there, done that. Yeah. So you were
I was new.
You were the youngest. You were the kid.
I was new.
Yeah.
A few of us were new.
Yeah.
But a lot of them had worked for him before.
Yeah. What was it like adapting what you did toward his style? I mean, that's a completely different thing.
It's like with any choreographer. If you were a trained dancer, you had to put yourself into his posture and his figure, and you imitated what he did. Mm-hmm. But I was really well trained. I mean, I tap dance, I did jazz, I ballet, I did it all. So it wasn't an adjustment.
Right.
You just had to get in his position of the body to make it work.
Which is a little unconventional for someone who's classically trained.
And you can see that in the movie of Sweet Charity.
Yeah.
On the Frug, when the trio comes down, I'm one of those boys. I think I was on audience right, stage left. But I can't remember which side I'm on.
Yeah.
But you see him, Ben Vereen was in that number.
Yep.
So you watch that number now, and I'm in it. And I'm a Bob Fosse dancer.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, one of the greatest compliments I ever received at the Fred Astaire Dance Awards one night, he got the choreography for Big Deal, which flopped on Broadway.
Yes.
But he got best choreography, and when he got up for his acceptance speech, he said, I'm thrilled to have this award because I think that some of my best work was done in Big Deal, and now it's closed. He said, so I'll go back being the insecure person that I am, which is interesting that he would be that, but he was.
Yeah.
And he said, but I'll tell you one thing I'm not insecure about tonight is the love I have for my dancers, and 4 of them are in the audience tonight, and I like them to stand up. Anne Ryan King, Donna McKechnie, Roy Reams, and Ben Vereen. I cried.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do that now thinking about it.
Yeah.
That was one of the best compliments I've ever had in my career.
Yeah.
To be a Bob Fosse dancer. And after their deaths, Nicole, their daughter, has called me up a couple of times for reference and to be interviewed. And I'm so proud of being known as a Bob Fosse dancer.
Yeah.
And to have worked with Gower Champion,
Yeah.
who just was an incredible stager. And the best musical number ever staged is the Hello Dolly number. It is so, no one will ever do it better. They should just do his choreography. He was brilliant. And my experience with 42nd Street, well, we'll get there.
Yeah,
but,
we will get there.
you know.
But let me ask you, jumping just a little bit ahead, I'm sure you watched Fosse Verdon when that was on a couple of years ago.
Yes, I did.
What did you think of that?
Well, see, I didn't know personally what their life was, so that was interesting.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I went to the premiere of that, Donna McKechnie and myself.
Oh.
We sat together and watched it, and I mean, I had heard the rumors, I knew the story, and Bob stopped a lot of women.
Sure.
I mean, he did, and but that was whether it was his insecurities or his need, I don't know, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
So that's what it was. It had nothing to do with his talent. And
Right.
Gwen and he never divorced. You know, they stayed married because they were such a team
Yeah.
and such a collaboration that personally they got rid of that and just remained professional friends.
Right, right.
And but it was interesting because, you know, all of that stuff. But I and Nicole, you know, the daughter, approved that. But I thought it was wonderful because it was the truth.
Yeah.
At least the way that Nicole and a lot of people saw. So none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
And I find that you tell the truth. It shows that all of us have the good, the bad, and the ugly in us.
Right.
And that's the way life is.
Yeah, yeah.
And it didn't delete his genius
Right.
as a choreographer, but as a man, you know, he was flawed.
It gave you the fuller picture.
Yeah. Sure.
I had met, this is very much in passing, I had met Cheetah Rivera after, it's the only time I've ever been in a room with her. We went to see her 54 Below show. And I had met her afterward, and someone had asked her if she had watched it. And she said she wouldn't. She said she wouldn't watch any of it. She, I think there was something about that time that she kind of wanted to keep this way, and she never felt that it would be, you know, the most accurate. So she said she didn't want to watch it.
Well, see, if I do anything, I want to know everything. There are actors who say, I don't want to see anybody who's done it before. I'm going to do my interpretation. I'm not that way. I want to see everything.
Yeah.
I want to see who did it, who didn't do it, the whole story behind it, and then I will make my selection as to what I do.
Right,
But
right.
I like the research, and a lot of actors and creative people don't.
Yeah.
So
So subsequently, after you left Sweet Charity on the opening night, how crazy,
Yeah.
you go to do the nightclub act again. And how long did you do that before you came back to do the film?
well, I stayed in California and started doing TV
Oh,
shows.
right. You said you started doing the TV
on
shows.
the musical variety shows, and then Bobby asked me to do the film.
Right.
So I was already in California.
Right, right.
And we had such a good time doing that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a lot of dancers from New York and some from California. I knew them all.
Was it mostly everyone who was in the original cast?
No. There's some California kids there.
Mm-hmm.
But we just had a great time. We laughed, and we drank coffee and ate donuts all day long. And we loved Bob Fosse. And Gwen was there coaching Shirley MacLaine. That was hard for me.
Really?
Because not to delete what Shirley MacLaine did, but Gwen's showing Shirley the stuff. And I'm looking there saying, well, not as good as the original. Because it was Gwen. But and Shirley did a lovely job in the film. And we had a great time doing it. And when we did the pre-record, Fosse brought in me, Buddy Vest, and Ben at the pre-record.
Wow.
For the Frug doing the songs, and at one point I made a face, and he said, well, "What's wrong? What's wrong, Leroy?" I said, "Well, it's the drums on the boxing thing. They had to go. It's the bass drum. It's not." He said, "Get over it. Tell." So we were there, and I thought, "Oh my God, this is incredible. I'm working with Bob to do this." But we had that kind of unity. We were all loving each other, and I know when we went in to do Edith Head. They're the costumes. My first day on the set, I was taken with Edith Head and her little golf cart that she drove with a fringe up to her studio. And I was fitted by Edith Head. I mean, I was so impressed. And she showed me the sketch, and I said, I love it. I said, but we all seem to look alike, and since Buddy and I are featured, instead of the bow tie, can we have like that floppy tie like George Balanchine wore that, kind of. She said, oh, I said, and also, can we have spats on our shoes? because just to make us different. So, yeah, so she did that.
Wow. You're giving Edith Head
Yeah,
notes.
so that we would, be different. And I said, and also, I said, the sketch, I said, would you autograph that for me? And she did.
Oh, wow.
She gave me my sketch, and everybody said, she never did that. So I loved Edith Head. Now, for the Rhythm of Life number, we go down to Western costume. Gwen, Buddy, Ben, and me.
Yeah.
We go down to Western costume, and we're up going through the racks
Yeah.
to get our clothes for the Rhythm of Life number.
Mm-hmm.
And I found this red velvet shirt. I said, oh, I love it. It had kind of the full sleeves. And Gwen found these paisley pants. She said, here, try these on. I said, oh, great. And I found a pair of desert boots that laced up. And then Gwen found this fur jacket like Sonny and Cher used to wear. She said, oh, put this on. It's like Sonny and Cher. I put that on. I said, I'm an Indian. And we had to be disguised because we were in the fruit. We couldn't be recognizable.
Sure.
So I had to have a goatee and a beard. And I wore, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Liz Taylor's Cleopatra wig.
Oh, my goodness.
I wore Liz Taylor's Cleopatra wig, and I put an Indian band with a feather sticking out the back. So we picked out our own clothes for the Rhythm of Life number.
Wow.
Designed by Edith Head, but not in that, honey.
Yeah.
So we all had our... I mean, you see that movie now, I pee when I watch it.
Yeah, right.
And the movie was really good, and what happened with it, Bob got so caught up with that viewfinder on everything that there were a lot of cuts. Now, when you would see one number, it was so exciting, but there were so many fast cuts, I think it had lost the concentration of the movie.
Right.
But then his second movie was Cabaret.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Cabaret was
boy,
nice.
did he find out. And that movie is so brilliant, I cannot tell you.
Yeah.
And I was on tour doing some show, and I went to see it, and I wrote him a letter. And I told him, I said, this is one of the greatest musical films, and I just ran it and raved. And Bobby answered me, and he had a typewriter. He didn't have a secretary that he would type like this, bing, ding, 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 ding. And he sent me a typed letter, and at the bottom he signed Bob, And he told me in the letter, he said, you made my day today. I floated on air because you wrote me that letter. Now, tomorrow I'll go back being the insecure, person I've always been. And he said, but for this day, you made my day. Thank you. Yeah. I saved the letter. I framed it.
Oh, my gosh.
And, but then after that, as far as us working together again, he didn't do any show that perhaps, I know I auditioned for Pippin.
Right.
And Ben ended up doing the role.
Yes.
But, and got a Tony Award for it.
Right.
And, so I never got the pleasure of doing that again. Then I started doing roles. So then I wasn't dancing in the ensemble anymore.
Right.
And my first role when I wasn't happy on the Carol Burnett Show.
Yeah, so talk to me about that. Talk to me about the shows that you did. There was the Dean Martin Show too, am I right?
The Dean Martin Show, the Red Skelton Show, the Danny Kaye Show.
Right.
And, I could tell you want to hear some
And so
bad
were you
stories?
a part
some
of a
good stories?
dance troupe that was doing
Well,
that?
what it was, everyone knew everybody.
Yeah.
The dancers, all the choreographers knew the dancers. And I always got jobs being a regular on the show. Mm-hmm. Like I was a regular male dancer on the Danny Kaye Show.
Right.
There were two of us, Roy Fitzell and myself.
Okay.
So then when they would do bigger numbers, depending on who the stars were, they would job people in. But I was always on the job. I was a Peter Gennaro dancer on the Ed Sullivan Show. I was a
Yes, right. Yes.
I was a Bob Sidney dancer on the Dean Martin Show. I was on the Red Skelton Show for I can't think of his name now. Wonderful dancer, a choreographer. I'll think of it in a minute. And then Ernie Flatt for the Carol Burnett Show.
Yeah.
And so I worked all the time. And sometimes I would do 2 shows a week. They would share me. Mm-hmm. But I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere.
Right.
And on the Carol Burnett Show, I gave her a record of me singing. And she said, oh dear, she never knew my name in 3 months. And not that she was mean or anything,
right.
But she had a lot of work to do. And, her being Miss Congeniality wasn't part of with us,
Yeah.
But I realized that I was stuck. And she said, oh dear, we'll talk about that record. Of course, we never did. And I thought, I'm on a treadmill here. I'm never going to do anything more than this. Right. I was interviewed at Universal when we did Sweet Charity to be a contract player. And I can't remember the casting director then. I'm 82 years old. I can't remember everything. So I had an interview, and she said, well, we could use a kid like you on the lot. You can play the Italian, Spanish parts, because I have black hair. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, That's interesting because not that I can't do the accent. I could talk Italian, I could do Spanish, whatever you want. But I said, the thing is, I'm really Irish and I sing and dance. Well, we are not doing musicals anymore. We're only doing Sweet Charity for Shirley. But I said, so what do I have to do? So, well, we sign you to a 7-year contract.
Right.
And you make $350 a week, which I had made dancing for Juliet, and actually more than that, 400 when we played Vegas.
Right.
And I thought, well, and I said, so, and she said, and then every so often they give you a raise. I said, so can I leave to do a show? No. When you sign the contract, you can't do anything without our
You're stuck
approval.
for 7 years.
You're stuck for 7 years. I said, well, what about you? Oh, we can get out of the contract anytime. So it scared me.
Yeah, of course.
And I thought, my God, I mean, what if I get stuck and they put me in a series where I walk in as a waiter or something and I don't have any say-so? It just scared me.
Yeah,
and,
7 years is a long time.
Yeah,
anyways.
and I said, well, this is it. I've got to get back to New York. And that week on the Carol Burnett Show, Ernie Flatt said, they were doing a takeoff on the Jungle Book. And Carol was going to play Mowgli.
Yeah.
The boy.
Yeah.
And so Ernie said, Leroy, do you want to be the front end or the back end of the elephant? And I said, neither. And can I talk to you at the end of rehearsal today?
Right.
And I said, Ernie, I will finish the week. And you gave me my first job. I'm obligated. But I said, Ernie, I've studied too hard. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. I've got to go back to New York. So I'm handing in my notice. I'm leaving.
Wow.
And at the end of that week, and of course,
and that sketch was the huge sketch too. That Jungle Book sketch, I think, is the iconic.
But they had dancers all over California. You would have loved to have had a weekly job. So it wasn't a big deal.
Right.
So I handed in my notice, and I got my car, my '64 Galaxy XL, which was my graduation present from my mommy. And I'm going to drive home, and then I got a call from Mitzi Gaynor, me wanting to do her act.
Wow.
And so they said, if you'll just get us started, you can drive to Lake Tahoe just to get the act up, then I'll replace you. Yeah. So I did that. I love Mitzi Gaynor. Oh my gosh, she was one of the most talented people I ever worked with.
Yeah, she was incredible.
She was just so talented.
Yeah.
And so then I left, and then I went back to home to be with my family, and I helped the university run a showboat on the river that summer, and I got credit for my master's degree.
Oh, lovely.
And that's where I met Pam Myers, who was a student and going into her senior year. She was one of my leading ladies.
Okay, so you come back to New York, and you got a job on the Ed Sullivan Show.
On set for Peter Gennaro, who was a wonderful choreographer. I love Peter. I couldn't wait to get to rehearsal. I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
He just had rhythm in every part of his body. You put on the music, and Peter just went. He was so wonderful, wonderful man.
Yeah.
And then there was an agent, and I can't remember his name now, who handled sort of dancers, and then he lost his license, but someone else was, and he got, so I found him, and he got me auditioned for Lincoln Center for a revival of Oklahoma.
Yes.
At the New York State Theater with Richard Rodgers.
Yes, right, with Richard Rodgers. Let me ask you before we get there about Ed Sullivan himself. Mm-hmm. What was, how long were you on the Ed Sullivan Show?
I would say for a season.
Wow.
Season.
What was Ed Sullivan like?
We don't know. We never saw him till the show. We had no interaction with him whatsoever.
Wow, really?
But I danced with Gwen and all of the star ladies. I mean,
on the show.
On the show. Oh,
wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And of course it was, we were in the Ed Sullivan Theater there.
Yeah.
And it was just great fun. And Peter was such a delight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
that's lovely.
I'm all the star ladies. My hands all over.
Yeah, right.
I'll give you one dirty story.
Okay.
One dirty story. You can cut it if you need to.
No, not at all.
In Juliet Prowse's act.
Yeah.
She did this thing where she stepped into the arm of one of the boys, then she did développé into a rond de jambe, into a split. Then they put her legs together, and I ran up, got her by the buns, and carried her downstage and set her down. And one night, my thumbs went right in.
Oh, boy.
And I put her down. We were laughing so hard, I peed myself that night. And Juliet was beside herself, so these hands... They've been on Joey Heatherton, Janet Leigh, Rita Moreno, Donna McKechnie, and Ryan King.
Goodness.
All over the bodies. These hands have been all over my...
Oh, my goodness.
I could give you a list. Ann Miller, all of them. Sid Charisse. I've had these hands on all those incredible ladies.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So, Oklahoma, you had an agent from the Ed Sullivan Show.
No.
Or no?
He was just a freelance agent.
Oh, okay.
And then he had to go through the Ruth Webb agency. I remember that. So she actually submitted me, but she paid him, I think, on
But
the
he
side.
found you through the Ed Sullivan Show, or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
That's
he was known to
Yeah.
have handled dancers.
I see.
So I found him, and
I see.
and
I
so
see.
he submitted me. And
How crucial was it back then to have an agent?
it was a necessity.
Was it?
You could audition for the ensemble without
Yeah.
an agent.
Okay.
But if you wanted roles, you had to go through agents.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
They didn't
That's
have
interesting.
open calls for. No, you had to go through agents.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So he got me the audition, and I was told, you do not sing a Richard Rodgers song.
Right.
Because he's very particular about it, and he thinks you're patronizing when you sing his songs.
Right.
So when they were auditioning at the New York State Theater, so I arrived for my audition, and I thought, well, I'm going to be so smart. I'm going to show him that I can really sing.
Yeah.
Besides
And you were
being a
going in for
dancer.
Will Parker, am I
I'm
right?
going in for Will Parker. So I was going to sing, I did sing Leonard Bernstein's Lonely Town, a ballad,
Yes.
because I wanted to show him my voice.
Right.
And so I got about one line, and he said, I don't want to hear that song.
Yeah.
You're here to audition for a comedy character. Don't you have a comedy song? And I said, no, Mr. Rodgers, I don't. Well, you have to have a comedy song. And I said, but I can sing Kansas City. I know that. He said, well, why wouldn't you sing that? You sing that in the show. And I said, I would love to sing it for you, Mr. Rodgers. So I sang 2 choruses of Kansas City. And he said, young man. I said, yes, sir. He was very gruff.
Yeah.
He said, can you dance? I said, yes, sir. He said, show me.
Oh my gosh.
And I had a dance routine. So I did my dance routine. He said, young man. I said, yes, sir. He said, is there anything you can't do? I said, no, sir. And I got the job. I didn't read the script.
Wow.
I was cast as Will Parker in Oklahoma for Richard Rodgers at Lincoln Center.
Wow.
I was beside myself.
Yeah.
And my aunt Eller was Margaret Hamilton, the Wicked Witch of the
Wicked
West.
Witch from Wizard of Oz.
Oh my God. And we became fast friends. She had a beautiful apartment down in Gramercy Park. And I would go down there, and she would make for us what she called toasted cheese sandwiches. We called them grilled cheese. And we would have tea. And she signed all of those 8x10 pictures from Wizard of Oz to all my nieces and nephews. And she was just...
Oh my
Maggie,
gosh.
I love you. She was such a pro, and she was wonderful in the part.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But Richard Rodgers, and I would just sit there and look at him and go, that's Richard Rodgers. He picked me. He likes me. And every time he'd walk in the room, I'd think of Summer Chatted Evening, Climb Every Mountain. I go, my God, all those songs came out of that man. And he had part of his jaw removed from cancer at that time.
Oh.
But I got to know him, and I never got a note from him.
Oh, really?
I never got a note, and he signed my poster for me.
Oh, wow.
I got smart by that time about getting people to sign stuff.
Yeah.
So he signed and I didn't want anybody else's name on it.
Yeah.
Because my thing was, if your name was on the poster, I wanted you to sign it.
Yeah.
And but I just wanted Richard Rodgers, and the fact that he picked me. And of course, I laughed because my image, I always have an image when I do a character. My image for my Will Parker was Doris Day and Calamity Jane. Because I just got in from the windy city, and that was my image. But Richard Rodgers liked it. That's all I cared about.
That's all that mattered.
That's all I cared
When
about.
he asked you to do Kansas City, was he asking you to dance at the same time while singing Kansas City? Is that right?
No. I had a dance routine that I did.
That was separate.
That was separate, yeah.
Okay.
I sang 2 choruses
Yeah.
of Kansas City, and then I did my big dance number.
Oh my gosh.
And Agnes DeMille
Yeah.
supervised, but she did choreograph. It was Jimsy DeLapp, who was wonderful, who was Agnes DeMille's protege and her choice to restage the musical, and no one knew it better. And then her assistant, Dennis Cole, I knew.
Yeah.
And she didn't really set Kansas City because it was more tapping. And Dennis set that. He was a friend of mine. And during rehearsal, I said, Dennis, this number. And I'm more balletic, so I added a lot of stuff that wasn't done originally, only because I could.
Yeah.
And at the end of the number, I didn't think it had a finish. And I said, Dennis, it doesn't have a big finish. And I said, I think what we should do, if we can, I'll start that step by myself and have 2 boys join, then 4, then 6, and everybody doing the step. We'll yell, then I'll run up stage, I'll get in a line, I'll run and dive through the air. Whoops.
No, that's all right.
I dove through the microphone. And I'll dive through the air, and then they catch me. And so we thought, oh, what if they don't approve or Agnes doesn't like it?
Yeah.
Jimsy never said anything, and neither did Agnes, so it stayed. But it put a finish on the number.
Who directed that production?
John Kennedy.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there anything different about that production compared to
Yeah,
the
what
original?
in terms of
It was the same staging.
Oh.
It was the same staging, the same choreography.
And I think it was the second revival already. It was 69.
Well, I don't
right?
know whether it was the second. I think it was the first.
I think it was the first.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I think there was one on 50s.
There were a couple after that. I
Yeah.
think it was the first revival.
Oh, really? Wow. What was I guess what fascinates me about these stories between this and Sweet Charity already is the room for collaboration. And I wonder if that was something that you did or if that was something that was encouraged in terms of you were like, I feel like if I was in a Broadway room with these people, there would be a whole lot of like, yes. But the room to say, hey, I think this needs a big finish, or hey, I think it is, that's interesting that there was a lot of allowance.
Well, I was an ensemble member in Sweet Charity.
Right.
So, I wouldn't be able to comment on that. But it was collaborative on Oklahoma because, see, a lot of people who did that role were character people who just sort of like tap danced.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of training and I could be more athletic in doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm a dancer.
Right.
So, and I also am a singer. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the dancers who did the part weren't singers. Mm. So, I managed to bring that into. And also I'm an actor. I studied a lot of acting. So, I was proficient in all three categories.
Yeah.
And now the kids that come in, my God, these kids today can do anything.
Yeah.
They come out of those universities and those kids can do anything. They're just incredible.
Yeah. It feels like you kind of have to in certain respects.
Yeah, well, because you can't afford a large company.
Yeah.
Back then when we did Oklahoma, we must have 50 people in the show. Mm-hmm. There was a singing chorus, there was a dancing chorus. When we did Jones Beach, we did Showboat out at Jones Beach on a big a showboat that they built that came in and docked at the stage. It was so exciting.
Oh my goodness.
And we had a black chorus, we had a white chorus. And I mean, it was more than that. It was a lot of people. They can't afford to do that anymore.
Yeah, right.
If you have a cast of 20, you've got a big show.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah,
How
it
many
is
shows
true.
do you know that over 30?
There's really a handful this year.
That's right.
If you look at it, I mean, that's and there's certainly no dance chorus, singing chorus. Like that feels like a major rarity. I think Hell's Kitchen has that, but there's very few.
You got to do it all at the same time.
Yeah.
Singers dance and dancers sing.
How involved was Richard Rodgers in rehearsal for Oklahoma?
Well, we had to sing our songs for him in a private session.
Oh.
And when I did my Kansas City, when I finished it, he said, Leroy, and he called me forward. He said, now, when you do that, counting 20 gas buggies, put your hand down here and go, counting 20 so I can see your face. I said, yes, Mr. Rodgers, is that it? He said, yeah, that's it. That was my only note.
That's unbelievable.
But I would just, and of course, he still had an eye for the ladies. I shouldn't tell the story, but I'm going to tell it. April Shawn, who played Ado Annie, was well endowed.
Sure.
She had these big boobies.
Sure.
And he would stare at her and drool. And Lee Beery, who had these huge big blue eyes, she was so gorgeous. She couldn't get him out of her dressing room.
Oh, my goodness.
She would say, Mr. Rodgers, you have to leave now. I have to get dressed, Mr. Rodgers,
Oh, my goodness.
So he liked the ladies.
Yeah, right. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so talk to me now. How long, you were in Oklahoma for how long?
Well, just a season.
Okay.
It was a limited run at Lincoln Center.
Oh, wow.
We did the summer.
Okay.
Which they did, I think, that series, they did 5 shows. They started out with, I think, Showboat. And then they did Annie Get Your Gun and King and I. Right. And I can't remember the other one. And then Oklahoma was the last.
I see.
But Richard Rodgers had that theater for the summer.
And can I ask, this is maybe a silly question, but Oklahoma, I mean, it is a show at that point, it's already something like 26 years old. Was it already considered like this like classic that it is now? Did you knew Oklahoma, you had seen the movie, like you went in knowing the whole
thing? One thing I forgot, we have to go back. When I told you the story about getting the scholarship at CCM, I didn't tell you that little 14-year-old girl went to New York. New York City Ballet's Diana Adams came through auditioning kids, and she took her to New York to get a Ford Scholarship. She got it and changed her name. She was Suzanne Farrell of the New York City Ballet.
Oh my gosh.
So that was little Susie Ficker who got
Wow.
my, I forgot to tell you that
That's
story.
so interesting. Yeah. But yeah, so I guess you walked into Oklahoma knowing it was already a very...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And also at the New York State Theater, now going back to about Suzanne Farrell.
Yeah.
Because when I would go down to see her dance, because of her mother, we would sit in the viewing room, which was free. So I got to see Susie dance everything.
Yeah.
And when we went on stage to afterwards, she said, "Would you like to dance across the stage with me so you can say that you danced on the New York State Theater stage?" I said, "What makes you think I can't get my own show and dance on the New?" So we laughed, and she did a tombe pas de bourrée glissade. I carried her across. I said, "Now you can say you danced that summer. I did Oklahoma, and I was on that stage."
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it wasn't your first time doing Oklahoma.
So anyway, that's a good story.
That's interesting, yeah. So the next year you booked Applause
Yeah.
in 1970. Tell me a little bit about Applause.
Well, going up to that, I got the audition for Applause. I knew Ron Field. I had worked for him. A long, long story about him. I don't know if you want to go through all of that.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll tell you. Ron Field, when I was an ensemble boy, chorus boy, out in L.A., Ron came out to do a TV special, and they needed one more male dancer. And three of us were called in to audition. And I wore navy blue dance pants, white jazz shoes, a red and white striped shirt. Now, this is the mid 60s.
Yeah.
And I had a blue and white handkerchief scarf that I tied around my neck.
Yeah.
And while we're auditioning, the other two guys who were dancing with me, and I'm not bragging, but I knew I was the better dancer. But I wasn't picked. Ron was just ignoring me. So that was it. And then right after that, I was dancing with Sid Charisse on her first TV special. And Tony Sharmley, who choreographed, the night of the premiere had a party to which I was invited. And so we all go, and Ron Field was one of the guests. So after the viewing, of the TV show, Ron Field came and said, "I owe you an apology." He said, "When you came and auditioned for me, I didn't know who you were." He said, "But I couldn't look at you in that fucking American flag outfit you were wearing." And I said, "Well, God forbid I could dance." Because I thought, fuck you. There are other choreographers here in the city. I don't have to worry about you. Fade out on that story. Then the next time, I'm in New York, and I get a call that Gwen Verdon wants me to dance with her on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I can't do it because I'm doing another thing. And I said, so I can't be there the first day of rehearsal. And they called back and said, it doesn't matter. She wants you to do it. You can come a day late. Well, I came a day late, and who is the choreographer but Ron Field?
Oh, boy.
And they're doing a number based on Jack Cole choreography, this East Indian jazz dancing. And Ron had studied that. Gwen was Jack Cole's assistant, and the other boys had studied it. I hadn't. And I was a day late. They had already set the routine. I came in, they were doing this. I said, I don't know whether I can do that or not. And Gwen said, no, you can do it, you can do it. I said, well, Ron, I'm here. So I will try. But if you think I can't do it, you can dismiss me. I won't be insulted. And if I feel I can't do it, please understand. I don't want to embarrass myself. So I tried it. And then Ron got very arrogant at the end of the rehearsal. And he said, I'd like to see a performance now. And I made a couple of mistakes. And we finished the performance. And I said, he said, Leroy, I said, Ron, I know the mistakes I made. I didn't think I could do it. But if you're patient with me, I can do it. It's just going to take me a little bit of time to get it in my body. He said, isn't that wonderful? Leroy Reams can do anything. Nothing is too difficult for Leroy Reams. And I thought, is he kidding? And Gwen looked at me and she said, tell him you won't do it. And Ron went out of the rehearsal, slammed the door. And I thought, oy. And that's how we finished. And so it was a little tension during that week. But I did the number. It's on YouTube, by the way. Wow. I can't remember what it's called. Gwen Verdon doing, she's a harem, and we were like, the guys in the balloon pants and, doing all of this with the swords. And so now comes Applause. Ron Field. And I thought, oh, here we go. So I went and I auditioned. And my agent called and said they liked you very much. and I think they're going to offer the role to you. And it's playing a gay hairdresser. And my agent said, I don't think you should do that because you might get typecast. I said, what are you talking about? I'm an actor.
Yeah.
You just play the character. I want a job.
Right.
Lauren Becall, I do
course.
Broadway, and I would be creating the role. Are you kidding?
A new Charles Strauss musical.
Yeah. Hey, Charlie Strauss and Lee Adams, the whole group there. And and Condon and Green doing the book. I mean, please. So the next time my agent called and said they offered it to someone else. I was so depressed. At this exact time, Juliet Prowse calls me. Come back and do my act again. And so it was near Thanksgiving. So I flew, and by this time I'm in a relationship with my eventual husband, Bob Donahoe. So I flew to Kentucky to have Thanksgiving with my family. And then I was going to fly out the next day to go to California to start rehearsal with Juliet. And I got to Covington. I got a call from Mark Mordo, her manager, said, Leroy, you've got to get on the plane. Juliet wants to start soon, so you have to leave. And I got there a couple of days early before. I said, Mark, I'm here in Kentucky. I want to have Thanksgiving. He said, well, that's all right. And they hadn't arranged for my ticket or anything. And he said, just go to the airport, get a ticket. And I was like Victoria Page in the red shoes, Maura Scher. My feet were, and I said, I don't want to do it. I can't accept defeat and go back what I did. I can't go back. So I called Mark, and he said, well, you tell Juliet you're not going to do it. So I called Juliet, and I said, Juliet, please forgive me. I can't go back and do it anymore. I got to go back to New York. I can't. I got to go back. And I said, you'll get another male dancer. Everybody wants to work with you. So I went back to New York. And
How did you feel about that?
I was very depressed.
Yeah.
And I came back to New York. I went right back on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I thought, well, here I am. I played a role on Broadway, and now I'm back in the chorus again. Really depressed. It's New Year's Eve in my wonderful apartment on 93rd in Amsterdam. And Bob is with me. And he got me a bottle of champagne, which I love. And we made a toast on New Year's Eve, and I said, I'm so depressed, Bob, I should have had that job. And he said, well, look, your agent didn't want you to do it because of playing a gay hairdresser, so it wasn't meant to be. There'll be other jobs, you won't have to worry about it. I said, no, but I should have had that job. And we toasted, went to bed. The next morning, ring goes the phone. My agent, they fired Garrett Lewis, and they want you to start rehearsal today to replace.
Why did they let him go? Why did they fire Garrett?
Well, Garrett was a very handsome dancer from California. He wasn't funny.
Okay.
And at least that's what I was told.
Right.
I never saw it.
Right.
But, and I said, well, and they wanted me to sign a run-of-the-play contract, which is a year. And the salary wasn't that good.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't that good. And they said, well, they have to pay him off. And I said, that's not my problem. And they want me to sign a year's contract.
Right.
And so Bob is writing on a paper, take the job, 6-month contract. Take the job, 6-month contract. So I said, I'll tell you what. I will do it, but I want a 6-month contract starting with the first day of rehearsal. And they were going to play 2 cities out of town. And so by the time we opened in New York, I would only be on the show 3 months. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And we only had a week's rehearsal before we went to Philadelphia to do the show. Baltimore. And so I came in that first day of rehearsal, and of course there's Ron Field.
Yes.
And I walk in, he says, Leroy, I'm so sorry. I should have hired you, I made a mistake. And I said, well, Ron, bygones be bygones, I'm here, what do you want? So he introduced me generally to the company. This is Leroy Reams, who's going to be playing Duane Fox. And they all went in. And so Ron said, Leroy, we got a week to throw you into this show. So they gave me a script, And he said, no. In this first scene you come into, it's backstage, it's after the opening, and you come in and they're singing this song, and you walk in and you go over and you stand by the closet. And at the end of the scene, you have a line after Eve Harrington does her soliloquy. I said, okay. I said, well, Ron, when I come in, since they don't know who I am, can I be carrying a fall and brushing it? You know, so they'll know I'm the hairdresser. Yeah. And I said, and then when I walk in and I said, and Miss Becall said, my friends call me Betty. And I said, Betty. She said, that's better. I said, I won't touch your hair, but I'll primp it so they know. Ron said, yeah, Leroy, now go stand over by the closet. Go to the closet. So I said, so I go over and I applaud. This scene goes on forever.
Yeah.
And Eve Harrington comes and she's got this big soliloquy. And I'm wondering, when the hell am I going to say this line? And finally I raised my hand and I said, when does this character get out of the closet? And Betty laughed.
Yeah.
And our eyes made contact, and that was it. It's like, and I do a show about it.
Yes, right.
On June the 3rd at 54 Below at 7 o'clock. I do a whole number about our relationship. We had a love affair, not sexually. We had a love affair, and at that moment, our eyes hooked, and it was cemented like magnets. And everything I did the rest of that day, she laughed at. And I learned the part. And then we were going to do...
Learned the part quickly, too.
Yeah, I learned it quickly. And then we were going to do a gypsy run-through before we went to Baltimore. Because that's what they used to do back then. And they would rent a theater. And we would do a run-through with just rehearsal clothes and props. So that's what they used to do. And of course, certain people were invited. Well, for our gypsy run-through that day, that afternoon, and the audience was David Merrick, Hal Prince, Stephen Sondheim. Every bigwig in New York was in the audience. And Betty was standing in the wings, ready for her entrance at the beginning of the show. And I could see her hand shaking. And no one would go near her. And I couldn't stand it. And I went up and I grabbed her hands and I said, why are you so nervous? It only depends on you. She laughed and she said, you son of a bitch. She said, don't leave me. I said, I'm not leaving you. I'm staying right here. I got you. She said, you promise me you're never going to leave me? I said, I promise you I'm not going to leave you. And we did that before every performance of the show. I would come at the 5-minute call, stand in the wings and hold her hands and talk with her.
Wow.
And because she didn't like to know who was in the audience.
Yeah.
And then when we got out of town in Baltimore, I'd come to the theater early. I would drop by to say hello, and she would say, come in while I warm up. So I would come in while she warmed up, and we would talk. And then they would call the half hour. Then I would go up, and after the show, I would say good night. And she would say, come in, talk to me. So I would go in after the show, and then she would say, honey, make me a drink. And at that point, she was having Jack Daniels on the rocks. And she changed to Stolichnaya. So that became our routine.
Wow.
I came in every night, talked with her during her warm-up. Then after the show, I'd come down and make her drink, and we would sit there and talk. And when we got back to New York at the Palace Theater, the stage door was on the inside, not on the outside where it is now. So there was an L-shaped alley. So after the show, and she signed autographs, people would get back in there. She was by herself. And I said, Betty, you should be going in that alley every night. I mean, you're by yourself. Said, what am I going to do? The stage manager's not going to take me. The doorman. I said, well, I'm here every night. I'll walk you to your car. She said, you would do that? I said, I'm here. Yes, I'll walk you to your car. And so she said, well, then I'll drop you. So every night I left with Lauren Becall in the limousine. Some nights we would get a Nathan's hot dog and eat it. Some nights I would go home, sit on her bed, and have Chinese food.
Oh, my goodness.
And it became our routine. And when my mother came to see the show, Betty would drive her home in the limousine. So that was our routine. I mean, it was incredible. By that time, I had gotten smart about having people sign my posters. Richard Rodgers and Sweet Charity. So if your name was on the poster, you sign your name. I had everybody but Betty Condon. And Betty Condon was coming to a matinee. So she wasn't going to see me, but she would see Becall. So I said, Bette Becall.
Right.
I said, when Betty Comden comes backstage, get her to sign the poster. And I left it in her dressing room. So after the matinee, I came down. And by the time I got there, Betty Comden is gone. I knocked on the door and I walked in. And I said, so did Betty Comden sign the poster? She said, yeah, she signed the poster. She said, oh, by the way, Leroy, this is Ingrid Bergman. And I thought, Miss Bergman, so nice to meet you. Betty said, why don't you have Ingrid sign your poster? And I'm thinking, she's not in the show. But what can you do?
At that point, yeah.
So Ingrid Bergman signed the poster. And Betty said, leave that poster here.
Right.
And every person you meet, you will get them to sign your poster. Yeah. You should see the names on that poster. The Luntz, Noel Coward, Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, the Kennedys, Yul Brynner. The names are over each
Yul
other.
Brynner.
I have that poster. And it's just incredible.
I want to go back a little bit. Did you get to meet Hal Prince and Sondheim?
That night when they came.
Yeah, I met them all. Everybody that she met in the dressing room, I got to meet.
Wow.
And I'll give you a good story. That's a good story. You don't know who the person would be, but some of the viewers will. June Lockhart, who was an actress. She was Lassie's mother in a TV show, and she was the daughter of a very famous actor. And Gene Lockhart. It will come to me, honey. I'm a little slow now. But, and at this time, June Lockhart was having a romance with a much younger, handsome man. And it was publicized. And so one night I go down and June Lockhart is there and I meet her with her young lover. And so we had a lovely talk. And so when everything was finished and they were leaving the dressing room, Bacall's dressing room, Betty said, oh, June, it was so lovely you coming back, and I'm so happy for you. And seeing the young man there, and June looked at us and said, well, you two know how we feel. And Betty looked at me, kissed me in the mouth, and said, yes, we do. And they went out and shut the door, and we threw ourselves on the sofa laughing.
That's so funny.
I mean, Bacall stories I have for days. She had a great sense of humor.
How long did Applause run?
Well, her contract was up after a year. She stayed a little bit after the year, and then Ann Baxter came in to replace her.
Okay.
And then Betty was gonna do the tour.
Yeah.
And I was gonna do the tour with her.
Okay.
And then she was going to London. I was asked to go there so we can go through that. What happened originally? Rita Hayworth was going to replace Betty.
Oh.
And they brought her to New York, put her up at the Plaza Hotel.
Yeah.
And she was going to rehearse for a week.
Wow.
And then she was going to do a formal audition. And the contract was that she felt she couldn't do it, she could get out. And if they felt she couldn't do it, they could get out.
Right.
So that was, and of course I was dying to meet Rita Hayworth.
Yeah.
And I said, please let me go and rehearse with her. You don't have to pay me. Don't tell Actors Equity. I want to meet. They wouldn't let me.
No.
But she did sign an autograph picture for me. So came the day of Rita Hayworth's audition. And Joe Kipnis, who was one of our producers, Joey Kipnis, who ran Kippy's Restaurant and the Hawaii Kai, Joe Kipnis. So he came backstage and I said, well, Joe, how did it go? How was it? I'll tell you how Rita Hayworth did. I'll tell you. One fucking week at the Plaza Hotel. Don't ask about the room charges. My daughter's seen the show twice. She knew more lines than Rita Hayworth after a fucking week at the fucking Plaza Hotel. And that was it. So Rita Hayworth was gone. And then luckily, they got Ann Baxter, who was terrific. And Ann came in and did the show.
Did you stay in the show even beyond that year?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was going to, And so during this time, unfortunately, my mother, who had a bad heart, was dying. Oh. So it was at the end of Bacall's run with Baxter going in, and I was rehearsing with Baxter during the day. But of course, my mother was dying. I left. And I went home, and I got a call from Larry Kasher, our other producer, said, Leroy, you've got to come back because Betty is hysterical. She's complaining every night about the understudy. And she's desperate to have you back to close the show. And Ann Baxter said she will not open the show until you're back.
Wow.
So he said, you've got to come back.
Wow.
And I said, but Larry, my mother is dying. And so I talked to my sisters, and my sister said, well, what would Mother want you to do? I said, you know what she would want me to do. She would want me to do my show. They said, so that's what you must do.
Wow.
So I came back that weekend, closed the show with Bette, and I was the one that gave her flowers that night. And a day off to put Baxter into the show, and we opened the next night with Ann Baxter. And in my dressing room was an envelope after the show with $100 and a round-trip airline ticket. No name. I knew who it was from. It was Ann Baxter. I knew it. So I went down to say goodbye to her and thank her. And she said, I didn't want you to know. I said, Ann, it was a great thing that you did, and I'm thankful. Thank you. And so I went back, and my mother had not died, so I was there for a few more days.
Wow.
And then she passed, and we had the funeral and all of that. And then I came back into the show and became very close with Ann Baxter, too.
Oh, really?
And then I didn't think I really wanted to go on tour because I was into a relationship with Bob, and then the money wasn't that great. And so they finally said, the producer said, what's it going to take for you to go on the road? And I laughed, and I said, oh, you can double my salary, and they did. Wow. So then I went on tour.
Oh, my goodness.
And we had a great time. And
with Bette?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then Bette felt that my agents weren't doing enough for me. So she wanted me to go with her agent, Peter Witt, which I did. And I was asked to go to London. And Peter Witt had a meeting with me, and he said, I'm your agent now, and you can't say a thing to Bette. I don't want you going to London. He said, you've done this show, and you have now played a gay hairdresser, and you're going to get typecast. And you can go to London for a year, have a wonderful time, and Bette will take you every place. You'll be her escort. But he said, you've got to immediately do another role on Broadway and change your image. And I listened to him.
Yeah.
And I got Lorelai, where I played an Olympic athlete. Talk about acting.
Right.
And so that began my relationship with Carol Channing,
Right.
which led to my doing Cornelius Hackle.
Yes.
And her first revival of Hello Dolly, which led to my friendship with Michael Stewart, 42nd Street, and Jerry Herman.
Oh, my goodness.
Was lifelong.
It's just everything kind of a
everything
snowball
went.
effect.
So who knows what the right road was, but that's the road I took.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about what it meant to be? Because from what I understand, Duane Fox in Applause was the first openly gay character in a musical, in a Broadway show at all. Yeah. Was that something that was addressed and purposeful, or was it no?
No, I didn't think a thing about it. Actually, I'm an actor.
Yeah,
I just play the role.
Right.
It wasn't me.
Yeah.
And I played him, but I didn't play him swishy or feminine. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to do that, and I wouldn't do that.
Right,
and,
you just
and
played
also
truthful.
Ron Field didn't want. We were both gay men.
Right.
We wanted him to be a regular person who just could be funny and could dance and sing.
Right.
And that's the way we did it. But there was a hairdresser at Oklahoma, John Quaglia, who I would watch his mannerisms when he would, and so I used that to get the laughs.
To inform you.
But none of that.
Sure.
No, I would never do that.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, what's interesting because of that, I used to get letters from gay guys all the time saying thank you for not being effeminate and doing that stereotype sissy thing that you played him as, and we were so proud of that we're all normal people. And that's now, people in their memory may have thought, but it's not. Yeah. I just played him as a normal guy.
Right.
Now, what was interesting when we went out of town, and of course the coming out line, we were in Baltimore, and the line in the show is Margot says with Eve Harrington, they're going out. She says, Duane, how would you like to take two lonely ladies out on the town tonight? And he says, I can't. I've got a date. And she says, well, bring them along. Laugh.
Right.
Not in Baltimore.
Oh.
And she said, bring them along. No laugh. And then we go into the gay bar scene, and there's all gay guys dancing in the bar. That was never on a stage before.
Right.
And my direction was to walk into the music, and I see one of the chorus boys, Bill Allsbrook, and I go in and see him, and I go and kiss him in the mouth in the audience.
Oh, my goodness.
So that scene didn't go so great that night. We go back and rehearsal the next day, and Ron said, Leroy, I said, I know, cut the kiss. So what we did, I just hugged him rather than, and then the joke was that I hug him, but then I introduce him to Margot Channing, and he holds out his hand to shake her hand after, that was supposedly the joke.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was something else.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah, and that was the big deal.
Did that ever come back when the show came to New York? Or was that
No, once we got to New York, it was,
It was what
they
it was.
got the laughs that they all,
Yeah.
I got so many wonderful letters from gay guys,
Yeah.
saying thank you for, and I kept one of them, and I'll be reading it that night if you come to 54 Below on June the 3rd.
There it is. Look
That's
at that.
my Carol Channing training.
Yeah, right.
But no, it was a big deal to me, and I never thought it was going to be as important as it turned out to be.
Right.
So
It still seems to
and
be
also
important.
the fact that I played Dolly Levi, the
Yeah.
first equity actor to play that role.
Right.
And the reason I could is because of Jerry Herman and Michael Stewart. That I got permission.
Right.
And for we actors, we should be allowed to do anything if we can carry it off.
Yeah.
And I think it's important as long as you play the role. I am very tired of stereotyping.
Yeah.
I'm tired of people writing stereotypical parts. I'm over that, and I think a lot of other people are too.
I think so too.
And it's time that we just allow actors to do what they do. And now we're so diversified.
Yeah.
My God. I mean, all shapes, sizes, colors, and ethnicities are being portrayed on stage now.
Yeah.
And so, that's the way it should be, as long as you're talented enough to service the piece.
Right. So Lorelai comes in 1974, and that you said is how you started your relationship with Carol Channing.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because from what I understand, Lorelai is a revised version of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Is that right? Okay, interesting. So what? I guess tell me about Lorelai and
Well-
how you got started in it, what your audition process
Well,
was like.
I got a call from Carol Channing.
Oh,
No, I'll do the conversation.
yeah.
Hello, Leroy. It's Carol, dear. Carol Channing? Like I didn't know she. Darling, I'm going to do a revival of Hello Dolly. And I want you to play Cornelius Hackle. But Lucia Victor, the director, doesn't know you, darling. And Jerry Herman doesn't know you, darling. But it doesn't matter. You got the job. And I did. And that became, and we were on tour for a year.
But this was already after Lorelai, Dolly, right? You're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in Lorelai, we were on tour. We were on tour for a year, as we also toured Dolly for a year too. So we did a year's tour of Lorelai, and then came back into New York and opened it and ran. And they thought, we got mixed reviews. They thought it wouldn't last through the summer.
Yeah.
So Carol's husband went ahead and booked her.
Oh.
And after the summer, we picked up business.
Oh.
So they made a deal with the producers that they would let her out of her contract. She would do a summer tour the next summer, which I didn't do. And that's how they did it. But no, the show, mixed reviews, but we were successful.
Right.
Playing Lorelai at the Palace Theater again.
Again at the Palace.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was Carol doing what Carol does.
Yeah. So talk to me about Dolly now. So you're Cornelius Hackle. This was already, from what I understand, you tell me, was this already like a dream show for you? You already knew the show. You already,
I love the show.
Yeah.
I love that character.
And it seems to have been a big staple in your life.
Yeah, and I've directed many actresses in the part. I did it myself, and
Yeah.
it's when I met Jerry Herman and Mike Stewart, and my friendship with Jerry Herman was through my career and with Michael Stewart.
Did
at
you-
42nd Street because of Michael Stewart.
Right.
So who knows whether that was the right road, but because of that, that's how it went.
Right. Did you have to audition even though Carol asked you to be a
No.
part of it? No, you didn't. Wow. So Carol asked you to be a part of it and you're in. Was that the first? That's the first time that happened.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
And what was interesting, I was told that, and I was interested in who was going to play Irene Malloy.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, it's a very dear friend of Jerry Herman's.
Okay.
So I thought, oh, probably an older, plump lady with a mezzo voice. I didn't know what to expect. And Florence Lacey walked into rehearsal, gorgeous. Irish girl with blue eyes, with a voice you couldn't believe.
Wow.
And so after we got to know each other, a couple of days later, I said, Flo, I said, I have to tell you this. You can't imagine what I thought when I asked who's playing Irene Malloy, and they said, Florence Lacey, a very dear friend of Jerry Herman. She said, stop. She said, think what I thought when they told me that you were a very dear friend of Carol Channing's.
That's funny.
And I had a love affair with, no sex, a love affair with Flo. She was married and she was just brilliant. And Jerry Herman has said, it's been recorded, that my voice and Florence Lacey's voices are the two voices he hears in his head when he writes music. And that we were the voices he heard in Dolly for the first time to really sing the score.
Oh, wow.
That he had two singers, and the first day that he heard a run through of us, and he heard me do "Out there, there's a world out," he jumped up and he said, "That's it. That's the voice. That's the voice I heard in my head when I write." And then when we did it, only takes a moment. He stopped the rehearsal and said, "This is the perfection. This is what I hear in my head when I write. These two voices." And so we did shows with Jerry, like a cabaret show.
Yeah.
And we were his two voices. I brag about that, but it's the truth, and it's been documented.
Yeah.
And
What was Jerry Herman like?
Oh, just a mensch.
Yeah.
Just the sweetest man.
Not as intense as Richard Rodgers.
No. But Richard Rodgers was always very kind to me.
Right.
I mean, he liked me.
Yeah.
And I liked him. But
Right. And it seems Jerry was the same way.
Jerry and I became personal friends. And
Right.
Whenever he would do things, he would take me along as his singer. And we did that show, Jerry Herman's Broadway years, on Broadway. Oh, no, An Evening with Jerry Herman. I'm sorry, we did many versions of it. An Evening with Jerry Herman, Flo Lacey and me at the booth, and wasn't successful. But we loved doing it. It's just they didn't understand what it was that we were doing.
Yeah.
But and it was Jerry playing his music, and I do Jerry's shows because I was coached in how he likes his songs done. Mm-hmm. So recently I just did If He Walked Into My Life with female lyrics, which he wrote for me, called If She Walked Into My Life.
Oh,
and because men don't usually sing that
Yes,
song. I just
right.
did it last night at the 54 Below. So it was the first time with the male lyrics, which he wrote for me.
Wow. You did it last night for the first time?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Gosh.
Were her days a little dull? Were her nights a passing phase? Was I silent? Was I bold? Was I quick to scold and too slow to praise? It's all, and where's that girl with a promise? The girl who tried to show me what love could be. Where's that girl with a promise? Why do I feel someone to blame is me? And it's just, he wrote those for me.
Gosh. Wow. That's unbelievable.
No, I mean,
amazing.
I'm a disciple of Jerry Herman's, and any time that I can sing Jerry Herman and explain my friendships with him, and I know all the history, I want to share it with everybody.
Yeah.
Because he was an exceptional, and Julie Stein, who was another one of my favorite composers, after doing Lorelai, Julie Stein said Jerry Herman was the Irving Berlin of his generation, which I think is the best compliment you could ever receive.
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh.
And I say this unabashedly.
Yeah.
All of Jerry's songs from all of his shows, you don't even have to know the songs. You give me a piano, and I'll sing the song, and it will translate immediately.
Yeah.
Lyrically and musically, and you will like the song.
Right. Yeah, well, his score, the Dolly score, it only takes a moment, especially. It's one of the most beautiful songs. I just sang it for the first time a couple months ago.
Oh,
and
it's
one of the most beautiful songs, I think, in musical theater.
And how about that speech that was Thornton Wilder through Michael Stewart did the Thornton Wilder speech about even if I have to dig ditches for the rest of my life, I'll be a ditch digger who once had a wonderful day. I mean, I did that soliloquy every night and cried. I could do it now.
Yeah.
It's just so meaningful. And when we did that production of Dolly, Cornelius and Mrs. Malloy really had a love affair. And in the show, that love affair was very important to us, and to show that.
Right.
And that reprise where they do dancing, which was cut from the revival. And a lot of those moments of, that's why I love to do the show, to try to give to other actors, and for history's sake, to explain the show the way Jerry wanted the show done and the way Michael Stewart wanted it interpreted. I was there with the people who created it, so I know what the intent was.
Right.
And I know the lines where the things, and then when I directed it, I took it a step further with Carol, because I said, we have to rethink this show now, because Dolly was really like a women's liber in a time when women couldn't vote, and they were possessions of a marriage. and the husband dies. I had a whole backstory about what happened. And the Irish, were low class. And if you were an Irish lady, you either sewed in a sweatshop or you were a maid.
Right.
And probably what happened was that Horace van de Gelder was a merchant in Yonkers, Dutch, and he came into this sweatshop, probably where Dolly was a sewer, and he got his stuff there. And then Ephraim Levi, a Jewish merchant on the Lower East Side, who had the shop. It was a hay and feed store in Yonkers, and it was a dry goods in the Lower East Side. So they came here probably to buy products to sell. And of course, Ephraim Levi saw this cute little Irish girl and wanted to date her.
Yeah.
And Horace van de Gelder, there was a song cut from the show that was restored, Penny in My Pocket, which explained how he became Yonkers half a millionaire because he married the boss's daughter. And so they went out as couples. That's why in the script, Van de Gelder keeps calling her Dolly Gallagher, which was her maiden name, because he probably was attracted to her then, but he was ambitious and was going to marry the boss's daughter. Right. So it understands that. And then, of course, Ephraim Levi dies. And because Ephraim Levi, they never had children, probably because they couldn't. And so, and Ephraim Levi always spent money, encouraging young things to grow. It's all in the speeches. And so when he died, probably a lot of people owed him money, and Dolly was suddenly in charge, and things didn't happen, so she had to do what a woman had to do, take some kind of profession. So she did everything, and one of which was a matchmaker.
Right.
So that explains what all of that was. So Dolly Gallagher knew Horace van de Gelder when they were all dating.
Right.
So that explains everything, and she's a matchmaker, and she makes these matches trying to manipulate people. And she doesn't know that Cornelius and Barnaby went to New York. And when she goes in the hat shop scene, she doesn't know they're there until they come out of the closet. So she manipulates all that stuff, and then she finally sets her sights on Horace van de Gelder, because now he's free. So she gives him the bad date at the Harmonia Gardens, and the thing that a woman had back then, which got her what she wanted, was her sexuality. That's how a woman could get what she wanted. And so Dolly, and with Horace van de Gelder, and in the courtroom scene where he said, I wouldn't marry you, Dolly Levi, you're the last woman on earth. And her attitude is, well, you don't want to marry me, Horace, but that's all right, because guess what? I don't want to marry you, but what I have is so good, but you can't have it. So wave your little hand and whisper, so long you ain't going to see me anymore. It's good, but you can't have it. That's what the number is about. And it's Women Lib. Right. She said, I'm going to learn to dance and drink a cigarette. I'm going to far away from Yonkers. As a girl, she gets out on that ramp, which she never did before. And I did that. Right. And she said, Dolly doesn't get on the ramp. And now I said, Carol, that's the road to your freedom. She goes out there, talks to Ephraim. She does the Dolly number. You've got to get back on that ramp. I fought her tooth and nail till I got my way. So I made those changes in the script. And So Long Dearie became a liberation, sexy number, which helped the show. And then also in the dancing number, the end of which Cornelius dances on with Dolly. Barnaby dances on with Mrs. Malloy. And in the music, I had Carol put Cornelius and her together, and they danced off saying, thank you, Dolly. She made it, and I kept Barnaby on stage. So that when Minnie came and danced around her, she saw Barnaby. Dolly sees Barnaby and goes. And Barnaby comes up, grabs Minnie, and he pulls her off. So they're a couple. Yeah. So she's match made.
Yes.
That wasn't in the original.
Oh,
and
very
so
interesting.
Then Dolly realizes I've match made everybody but myself. Let me go, Ephraim. It's time.
Right.
And
that's so interesting.
So that's where my head was going. So I added a lot. And of course, on the second revival, which I directed, Marge Champion-Gower's wife was my date.
Oh, really?
And so when those things happened in the show, she went, and she said, you fixed Dearie. She said, Gower never had a chance to fix it. Now it makes sense.
Wow.
And then in dancing, when Barnaby pulled Minnie Faye off, she went, fabulous. So she knew all the changes. I'm bragging on myself, but why the hell
not at all. No, I think that's interesting.
Because I love the show so much, and I felt that in other productions I've seen, not to mention them, because the directors do what they do. It was very important to me to have the romance and to have the understanding of Dolly as a matchmaker.
Right.
And the fact that women, what they went through at that time.
Yeah.
So it gives it a whole different thing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I didn't realize Penny in My Pocket was a cut song that came back. I had no idea.
It used to close Act 1.
Okay.
And then, good story about that.
Yeah.
When I was at 42nd Street, David Merrick had his stroke. And we hadn't seen him, and he was convalescing in his ex-wife's apartment, who he remarried and then divorced her again. And he was married at the time to Karen Prunzik, but he was recuperating in Eitan's apartment, and he had lost his speech and was paralyzed a little bit from the stroke. And I was appearing on the weekends at Freddy's on the East Side, doing the late show, because I love to do cabaret. And so I would go over there and do a late show. And Eitan called and she said, "Leroy, David keeps pointing to your picture in the paper. He wants to come see you." And she said, "It's the first time he's wanted to leave the house." And the doctor said, "Take him." And she said, "But he can't talk and he's on a cane. Don't let anybody photograph him." So I said, "You bring him, Eitan. We'll handle it." So the night he comes to Freddy's, and I go out to the limousine and we get him out. I'm on his left. Eitan's on his right. We walk into Freddy's and he's going, and I say, "Yes, David," and trying to have conversation, not understanding it. And he pushed me and he pushed Eitan and he was bending over. We thought he was falling. He found a penny on the floor, picked it up and put it in his pocket. And I said, "Eitan, I think David's feeling better." And so the next day I had a rehearsal with Peter Howard, and he did all the dance music and conducted Dolly. And so I was telling Peter the story, and Peter said, "Leroy, there was a song in Hello Dolly that was cut out of town called Penny in My Pocket. It used to close the first act before the parade passes by." He said, "I've got it back in my file." So he got like sheets of paper. It wasn't even, so he put it down and he's playing it, getting the lyrics. And I said, "Let's call Jerry." So we called Jerry Herman. And Jerry said, "Oh my God, I've even do it." So we were singing it over the phone. So I started doing that song, Penny in My Pocket. Then Jerry gave it to Michael Feinstein, who started singing it. And it eventually ended back on the show, in the last revival.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is insane. And that was the number that they used for the Tonys for the last revival, too. I mean, that was like, that was the number.
That's when it was restored.
Right.
In the show.
Wow. I had no, so it wasn't even in the version you directed. Wow. Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
But of course, in doing that, they had to cut that whole opening of the first act with Ambrose and Ermengarde and all that, so it took away part of the plot.
Yeah, sure.
By doing the show. It explained how he became half a millionaire. I do the song. It's a wonderful song.
Yeah.
How important it was to know that song, I don't know. I would have to talk to someone and say, "What did you think about it?" Obviously, Jerry Zaks thought it was important. So.
Was the song in the original version and then cut, or
The very original.
The very
Out
original.
of Town in Detroit.
Oh.
And it was cut in Detroit, and Before the Parade Passes By was put in.
Right. Oh wow. Were you communicating this to all the performers as well? Like all the like this mini Barnaby moment and all.
Absolutely.
When you're directing, yeah.
I think directing is a collaboration. You can't let the inmates run the asylum.
Yeah.
But you have to collaborate, and you have to, if you hire the right people for the parts, they'll do the work themselves because they concentrate on just themselves.
Yeah.
But you also, sometimes they're not always correct.
Yeah.
So you just have to be on the right page of what you're doing. Unfortunately, with a lot of director choreographers, they're more choreographers than they are directors.
Mm-hmm.
But as I say, you hire the right actor, they will bring you, and then everybody, it's like wearing a dress or a suit. You fit it to the person who's wearing it. So you have to make that adjustment and respect the actor.
Yeah.
So that
You're and collaborating. I mean that's such a big theme from what we're talking about, especially in terms of your career as an actor as well.
It's like I knew Michael very well, and Donna McKechnie and Michael, and I've talked with Donna a lot about that collaboration.
Yeah.
And what it was, Donna is so unique that she dances like nobody else.
Right.
You will all learn the step, but Donna does it somehow differently. When you see Turkey Lurkey,
Yeah.
she's got two fierce dancers behind her, Margot Sappington and Bjork Lee.
Yeah.
But Donna's there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think she and Michael were such a good match because she didn't necessarily dance like Michael, or try to. You have to when you do Bob Fosse's choreography. But and that's why they were such a good pairing of choreographer and dancer.
Yeah. Talk to me about the version that you did at the Wick in 2015 where you played Dolly.
Mm-hmm.
What did you, as an actor especially, gain from that production? What did you learn from that production being in the shoes of Dolly?
Well, I had done it with so many women that I could choose from some of the things that worked for me.
Right.
And also my mother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I when I did La Cage aux Folles,
Yeah.
a lot of what I did in La Cage aux Folles had to do with my mom. When she danced, how she'd pick up her skirt, and I did that when he's maman, you know. So I pulled from, you know, and when I had the pleasure of doing La Cage aux Folles,
Yeah.
I was lucky because I did it at Paper Mill Playhouse. I was cast in the New York company. It's the reason I left 42nd Street.
Oh, I see.
And but then they posted the closing notice my first week of
Before
rehearsal.
you even were able to. That's
Yeah.
right.
But
they
I
posted
mean, we can
before
talk
you.
about that later. But
Yeah.
that was you know, something where you have to bring in what you want to do, and
Right.
you find things. And if you're with the right director, you can create. And I learned a lot from some of the directors, like in the Best of Times scene.
Mm-hmm.
One of the directors, when I did a production, he had me put everybody together because it's a long song.
Yeah.
And it works so well.
Yeah.
So I kept that in my performance, where you see Zaza putting everybody together, and then with Dandon, she gets the other lady, Jacqueline, to go over, and of course he doesn't want to dance with her, so he said, well, you know, and in my mind, fuck him, I'll get him. And she gets him up to dance, and that's when she dances and pulls off her wig. So it all became a big plot thing.
Right.
So it
right.
wasn't just a big song number.
Yeah.
So you take and you steal. There's nothing wrong with stealing if it's what's best for the show or best for you as the actor.
Right. Right.
You know. I can give you many examples, so we'll go on. If you want to come back to it, I'll give you some
we'll come
examples.
back to it. Okay, the biggest one of all, the thing that I think people know you for the best is 42nd Street. In 1980, you originated the part of Billy in 42nd Street. You have such a great story about how you got that job, and I would love for you to tell it because it's one of my favorites.
Well, Mike Stewart had told me about this show, and of course I knew the movie. Just to watch it on the Late Show. And Ruby Keeler, Dick Powell. So I was so excited, and then I got the call for the audition. My agent called, and I had the time, and I said, now what's the name of the character? He said, Andy Lee. And I said, that's the Dick Powell part. He said, no, that's Billy Lawler. Andy Lee is about 40 years old. They think you're too old to play Billy Lawler. And Andy Lee's about 40 years old. He's the choreographer, a little on the tough side, but he doesn't have a number in the show. I wasn't going to go to the audition. I thought, fuck him. And so Bob, my partner, husband, said, don't be a fool. Just go in and do what you do. And in those days, we auditioned in theaters. Big difference than in these little rooms.
Very big difference.
Because then they want little performances and not what you do on the stage.
Right.
So I decided I'm going to get this part. So I got my accompanist, and I said, now, after I do my up-tune, don't wait for them to say, do you have a ballad? Go right into the ballad. And Tony Kay, one of my dear girlfriends, who was a fierce tap dancer, I had just done a show with her, which I choreographed, and she was in town. I said, Tony, you're going to my audition with me, bring your tap shoes. And I said, when I finish the song, you come out, and we're going to do This Can't Be Love, which is the number I choreographed. And you just come out and we're doing our tap dance. I said, oh, Leroy, you can't do it. I said, no, I'm doing it. So they called me out, and I walked out, and I hadn't met Gower Champion. I walked out, I did my up-tune, went right into the ballad. Tony walked out, we did the tap dance. And when we finished, there was dead silence. And coming down the aisle was Gower Champion, and I knew who he was.
Yeah.
So he came to the pit, and he motioned for me to come forward. I walked forward and I leaned over and he said, "You're not right for Andy Lee." And I said, "Yes, I know that." Mm-hmm. He said, "You're very right for Billy Lawler." I said, "Yes, I am." And there sat Howard Fuhrer. I would go back and kick him in his fat ass. But what can you do, right?
Yeah, right.
But then Gower was famous for changing his mind. So then a couple of days later, I got a call and they said, "Gower wants you to come in and do your thing again." Yeah. Well, Tony Kaye wasn't in town then. She'd gone back to L.A. And I thought, oh, well, now it's happening. Now everybody else in town is going to come in and now they're going to... So I go, "No, it's just me." And he said, "I'm getting ready to pick Peggy Sawyer. I just want to see you again and get up and do what you do so I can look at you." So I got up and I performed in the room and he said, "Thank you." And then my agent, then they called and they said, "Now he thinks he's found a girl to be Peggy Sawyer and he wants you to go in and work with her." I hadn't signed a contract. And my agent said, "Leroy, you shouldn't be doing this because he's famous for changing his mind." I said, "I'm not that insecure. Yeah. I know that part is mine." Yeah. So I went to the audition, and Karen Baker and Randy Skinner, his two dance assistants, were there. And the girl was Lisa Brown. She was in Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, and she was on The Guiding Light. And I adored her. And we went in, and she auditioned, and then Gower had us get up and work together. And so then when everybody left the room, Gower said, "Okay, now what do you think? Leroy." I said, "Oh, I think she's adorable." I said, "She's very right for the part. She's got a good acting sense. I think she's terrific." And Karen said, "You know, Gower, she's not a very good tap dancer." And I said, "Oh, I disagree." I said, "I think she was under a lot of pressure today. She could do the tap steps." And so Gower took her. She's going to play Peggy Sawyer. And she was going to come in on Monday to sign her contract. And that weekend, there was another open call for the ensemble. And at that open call was Wanda Richard. And at the audition, Gower said, "That girl's very good." And Karen said, "That's the girl who did Chorus Line in Chicago. She sent you a tape and you didn't want to look at it." She said, "Yes, she's a very good dancer." So Gower said, "Well, let's keep her and read her. Maybe she can be the understudy." And so he kept her, read her, changed his mind. Lisa Brown is coming down on Monday. She handed in her notice to the show, which they took. She handed in her notice to the Guiding Light, which they took. Yeah. And she hadn't signed the contract. She comes down and Gower said, "I'm so sorry, I changed my mind."
Oh, gosh.
And she had no legal recourse.
Oh, my goodness.
She could go back into, because they replaced her, but they did take her back into the Guiding Light.
Oh, gosh, good.
And what's interesting, there's a story about Mac and Mabel. It was Penny Fuller, then it was Marcia Rod, then it was Kelly Garrett, then it was Bernadette Peters. And they were calling the show Mac and Maybe. That's the joke that went around.
Yeah, wow.
And he was famous for doing that.
Gosh.
And
you weren't worried the whole time?
No. And I did sign my contract.
Well, that's good.
And Wanda Richard was a brilliant dancer. And I loved dancing with her. And what Gower did, Wanda, me, the two dance assistants at Gower, worked a week before we started rehearsal, just us. One of the happiest times of my life. I couldn't sleep at night. I wanted to just go to rehearsal because he was creating the show on us. And he did such great stuff with that show. Yeah. I could talk forever. I'm going to do a show at 54 Below with all of that stuff. Oh. It's my problem is it's not what I'm doing, it's what I'm not going to do because I have so much material. But to have had that ballet created on us, and Gower wasn't a tap dancer. I mean, he could, but he wasn't, but he wasn't a tap dancer. And so Randy and Karen were, and that's where a lot of the stuff. And the ballet was, I think, the best piece of choreography he ever did. I think Hello Dolly is the best stage musical number in our history. It's never done better than his original stuff. Great. And with the ballet, he had us talking to each other with our taps. And that was all Gower. He created all of that. Oh, wow. I thought it was brilliant. Yeah. And then one day in rehearsal, he said, "Leroy, you don't have a solo number in the show." I'm going to change my idea on We're in the Money. I'm going to have you come out and dance on a dime, because it was done by the girls. He said, so we're going to set it tomorrow. So we came in that afternoon, Karen, Randy, me, and Gower, and we put together We're in the Money.
Oh my goodness.
And he did the things with the carrying the dimes, the big dime.
Yeah, right.
And then I did my own taps. And by this time, I knew what he wanted. He would look at me, and I knew what he wanted. It was just the melding of two people who didn't have to talk. We knew what to do.
Well, what exactly did he want for especially thinking about the tap?
Well, he just said, Leroy, come on, come down, and now go stage left, and then come back, and we're going to lift up the big dime, do something in front of the dime. Now get up on the dime and do some steps. Now do something around the rim of it.
Yeah.
And now jump off it. And I put my taps into it. But I
Right.
choreographed. I knew what to do.
Yeah.
Now bring the boys back on, and I've got the step at the end,
Yeah.
So we did that repetitive step, which we did a repetitive step 3 times in the show, and I thought it was something psychological where he didn't want the show to end. Like I really did, because we didn't know how sick he was. And he didn't tell us. He told me, he said, I have an anemic blood condition. We didn't know what it was. We found out later it was called Waldronstrom's disease, which is sort of like the reverse of leukemia, white eating the red or the red eating the white, whatever it is.
Oh.
But that's what it was. We didn't know that. And but he was, his work ethic was incredible. When you're in the room, you couldn't talk. You had to be very, very still. And when we did Money, it was just incredible how we did that. And we never changed a step.
Yeah.
And we came in one day, and he said, I've got to choreograph Lullaby at Broadway this afternoon. I have no idea what I'm going to do. So we go to lunch, and we come back, and he gets us all up. And by this time, everyone knew when you work with Gower, you just be quiet and watch him. And he stood us up like a checkerboard or playing chess.
Yeah.
He said, okay, Jerry, now start the song with Wanda. She's got her suitcase. Put her on the suitcase. Now stand behind her. And now start swaying. And now get up, Wanda. Come down stage. Go back to get your suitcase. Put your foot on it, Jerry. Don't let her get it. And they did. They said, okay, now I want Leroy, Carol, Joe, and the principals, Karen. Everybody just sing the first part of Lullaby of Broadway. Come along and listen to the Lullaby of Broadway.
Right.
Everyone sang. Said, now Leroy, you sang. I went, come along, because everyone laughed because they knew I was going to get it. So I come out first. And then we came down the stairs, and he just did it. And then he said, now have the people on the side, Randy, Karen, you get on the other side, do this step. And we did that. He said, now we get ready for the kick line. And now everybody gather around her. And now she breaks out. Then she comes back, and she says, I'll do it. Then everybody, now we're getting to the line. The people that go, come along, come on along. And they said, now start the kick line, Jerry, Wanda. Now Leroy, come up, get on the right. Now go back the other way. Leroy, you change to get on the other side of her. And we just did it. We just did the number.
Oh my goodness.
And it never changed. It never changed. One afternoon. It was perfect.
And so he's putting this number on. Is it like on the fly, essentially? I mean, that's like, oh my gosh.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
We never changed a thing of it.
How involved was Randy and Randy and Karen? Yeah. How involved were Randy and Karen when it comes to putting those numbers together? Then, I mean, were they there for? I imagine they were there for We're in the Money too. With you guys.
Yes, yeah. And when we did Dames, it was a very complicated number because all the girls are coming out and they're in different colors. And they make a rainbow at the end.
Yeah.
And I'm singing, and Gower said, Leroy, just whenever it's time, find a hole, come through it, and pose. And I did. I mean, I didn't have to be told because by that time we were so simpatico with one another. I knew what he wanted when he looked at me.
Right.
And Karen and Randy too. We just knew what he wanted, and Wanda too. We were just, because we had worked that week before.
Right.
And so we were going around. I said, now Leroy, just find out to pose. And then Karen was working with the one side and Randy on the other, and they were moving around, and we did it. We did it.
Let me ask about the creation of the opening number. The curtain coming up. What was the inspiration behind that? When did you guys start? Where did you start there? Or is that how no?
Originally, there was a scene there, like in the movie. at the audition.
Yeah.
And then the number happened after that.
Yeah.
And Gower said one day, he said, I don't know why the hell I'm bothering with this first scene. They all came here to see tap dancing, so let's just do the number.
Right.
It was as simple as that. And so that's what they did, just with the piano. It wasn't the full orchestra. And that's when the curtain came up. And then Gower had said, I know that the stage manager said one time out, the curtain got stuck, and that's how that... No. Didn't know it was. And that's a good story, but that's not the way. What happened, Gower, nothing happened by accident in the Gower Champion show. Trust me now. The curtain may have gotten stuck. But Gower, I was there. He said, start the number. I want to hear the taps. Now slowly raise the curtain, but take a pause so I can just see the feet. Come and meet those dancing feet.
Right.
And then take the curtain up. That's the way it was.
Wow.
And
you
it was...
guys at the time how iconic this would be? Did
No.
you guess?
No. But it was right. He was right. They came to see tap dancing. We don't need that fucking scene.
Yeah.
Right.
Get rid of it. Cut it.
Right.
It's about the dancing.
Yeah.
And Randy and Karen did traditional tap steps. You know,
Right.
what the things are called, the shim sham or the
Yes.
time step and
Yeah.
all the... They knew how to do that.
Yeah.
So it was all straight tap dancing.
Right. Well, now it's like it's one of those things that every tapper knows, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know how to start that number, you know
Yeah.
what that is, and it also feels like a show that remains. And this is to Gower's brilliance, is that it's a show that remains the way it is. It is not a show that changes very much. That opening stays the way that opening is.
Like West
that
Side.
like West Side, like Chorus Line, like these are shows where the bulk of it, remains true to what was originally.
Well, I think that's smart. I don't think that you should change anything just to be different. I think you have to service the piece. Whatever fits and works, then that's what you do.
Right.
I mean, don't overthink it.
Yeah.
It's simple and has it to transfer to the audience right away. But the creation of 42nd Street was just incredible.
Right.
Out of town, a lot of things didn't change. I'll tell you a story about Wanda wanting her number.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted a solo number.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came up with a great number about I Only Have Eyes for You, and Gower said it's very Gene Kelly and I hate it. So that was the end of that. And then he was working on a number, and we were in Washington. And by this time, Wanda and Gower are in an affair. It's public knowledge. And we weren't allowed into rehearsal to see the number. And the day it was going into the show, that night, we were invited to the tech rehearsal. So the scene was, Julian Marsh says, you're going out there a youngster and you've got to come back a star. Bum, bum, ba-dum, bum. And the music, when the pretty logo came in, bled through. And there's this big saloon bar. And the boys, the guys in the chorus, are in white shirts and bow ties and aprons. And they're saying, give me back my mop and broom. Da-da-da-da, I can't remember the lyrics. Da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, because Lulu's back in town.
Right.
And from behind the bar came this leg, and Wanda climbed up in the bar in a pink fringe cooch costume going, gotta get your old tuxedo press. Peggy Sawyer? Wait, what is this number?
Yeah.
That night it goes into the show.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm backstage changing into my 42nd Street outfit, and David Merrick walks by me, and David Merrick said, know anybody who wants to buy a Lulu costume? It was out.
Wow.
One performance, it was gone.
Wow. That's wild. That's wild.
Never to be seen again.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Can you tell this story? I've heard this story. You told it somewhere, and I just think it's so funny about you going to the Woman of the Year opening night.
Oh,
and
with Ethel Merman.
With Ethel Merman.
Well, Bette Midler and I were very close.
Yes.
And of course,
and you remained close. I mean, beyond
yes,
applause, beyond
till the
all
day
of
she
that.
died.
Yeah.
And I was invited to the opening of Woman of the Year.
Yeah.
And Carol Cook, who was in 42nd Street with me, we were buddies.
Yeah.
And Carol said, I was talking to Ethel Merman the other night and told her you were going to the opening. And Ethel said, I'd like to go to the opening of that show. Tell them that maybe they can take us to their dates. So Carol said, well, I'm sure if I call the press office and say, hey, Ethel Merman wants to come to the opening, I'm sure I can get 2 tickets. So we did. So the 4 of us are going to go. And it was on a Sunday. And we went down, we rented a limousine. We went down to pick up Carol Cook. And we couldn't get over to the east side because all the passageways to Central Park were blocked. It was Greek Day. So we had to go up to 125th Street, cross over, and come down.
It might have also been the Puerto Rican Day Parade or something like that.
Well,
right?
I thought it was the Puerto Rican Day Parade. I was wrong. It was the Greek Day Parade.
Oh.
But I had talked on camera about it being so I was wrong about that.
Oh, I see.
It was Greek Day,
Uh-huh.
not Puerto Rican Day.
Who knows which one's worse?
Yeah, well, it's, that's really what it was. I was corrected by that. Because, your memory is not always
Sure,
right.
yeah.
So we go across, then we go down, and I couldn't get over to Madison Avenue to get at Ethel. We had to park on Park. I ran up to get her, and those days we didn't have cell phones, so you couldn't call. And we were running late. And so I called up to her apartment, and she picked up the phone and said, don't say another goddamn word. Those Greeks have been out there beating those fucking drums since 6 o'clock this morning. I'll be right down. And so she came down in this lime green thing with her beaded eyelashes. And so we get in the car, and we get over to the Palace Theater. There's no one in the lobby. I thought, oh, my God, we're late. So we go, and as we enter, they start the overture.
Wow.
So they go in.
How
Bob
perfect.
goes in first. Carol goes in second. Ethel goes in third, and I sit on the aisle. My armpits are dripping. They start the show, and they do the opening number. And they raise the curtain, and they're singing the song Woman of the Year.
Right.
And Becall is standing there looking gorgeous. And at the end of the number, she says, I'm Woman of the Year. And Merman went, Jesus! Like this in the audience. And of course,
That's so
everybody
funny.
looked back.
Yeah, right.
And then,
Ethel Merman just screaming.
and then as the show goes on, Becall comes on and she meets Harry Gardino as the characters. And she goes, and Merman had me, she said, that's the goon look, honey. That's called the goon look. I did that, Nanny, get your gun. And I'm going,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
of course, when Ethel talks, she talks.
Yeah, right.
And then later,
Might
when
as well
Harry
be doing a show in the
Gardino
audience.
sang the love song, she said, that's the only song in the score that's any good. The rest of it's like shit. I said, so this is Ethel Merman during Woman of the Year.
That song is beautiful, though. I know exactly
Yeah.
the song you're talking about.
And
That
then
song is a
as we're
beautiful
getting
song.
ready to leave to go get the limo, she said, let's go over to Sardi's and have a drink, for Christ's sake. So we went to Sardi's to have a drink, and we
Oh,
were
my
late getting the
goodness.
party. And because said, where have you been? I said, you tell Ethel Merman she can't have a drink.
Yeah, right.
So that was it. Ethel she spoke what was on her mind at the time it went. She was uncensored.
Right.
I'm telling you.
Did you have any other relationship with her or
Yeah.
anything? Oh, you did?
Yeah. She liked me. And when I had my caricature done at Sardi's,
Yeah.
Ethel, Ann Miller, Carol Cook, and Carol Channing were there when they hung that was
Oh,
my green. I have a
wow.
lovely picture of us all together.
Yeah, wow. There's this video on YouTube of you guys, and you guys are doing the Easter Parade number. And it's, or is it the Easter Parade number? No. Shaking the Blues Away. That's what it is. It's Shaking the Blues Away.
With Ann Miller.
With Ann Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the whole rehearsal process.
Yes.
It's this like tape, I guess, that was not meant to be released at the band that subsequently they released, and then they showed the number after. It's just beautiful. Talk to me a little bit about that and working with Ann Miller.
Well, Ann Miller was one of the most incredible tap dancers. Eleanor Powell was number 1, and Ann Miller number 2.
Yeah,
She
I wrote a
was
paper about her in
brilliant.
college.
Oh, Ann was very down to earth.
Yeah.
I'll give you a dirty story on Ann Miller, but I'm going to tell it. I was in 42nd Street. She was in Sugar Babies.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob and I had a great New Year's Eve party. And all the stars came. Carol Channing, Ann Miller, blah, blah, blah. It was a big party. Jerry Orbaugh, Tammy Grimes, they're all over there. Because I have a brownstone, and they all came. It was wonderful. And the guys had brought out the quiche yet. And I said, you got to get the... And Ann said, honey, you got too much food out here. Save that quiche tomorrow night after the show. You come pick me up. I got the limo. And we'll come up and we'll eat that quiche tomorrow night. I said, okay, Ann. So 42nd Street got out early, so I got to see like the last 5 minutes of Sugar Babies. And so I said, Ann, there's so much food. Let's ask a couple of the girls. And I can't remember if it was Jane Summerhays or Jerry Kansas, but I knew some of the girls. So we pile into the limo. And in those days, you could go through Central Park up to the west side. That's all closed off now. And so we get the limo and we go around this horse and buggy. And as we go around the horse and buggy, Ann said, "Oh my God, there's one of those horse and buggies. I was laid in one of those one night." I said, "You were what?" She said, "I was laid in one of those one night. Can you believe it? A man took me through the park and did it to me in one of those things. Can you believe that?" And one of the girls said, "Ann, was that one of your husbands?" She said, "You think I would marry a man that would do something like that?" That is a true story. I swear to God, that is a true story.
Oh my gosh. That is so funny. That is so funny.
She was an incredible woman, and she was working when she was 12 years old, and her mother would make her up to go out and dance. And she signed her contract with RKO when she was 14 years old. They doctored her birth certificate to make her 16. And so, yeah. But she was always working.
Yeah.
And she would come to the house, and she loved to go up. We had a toy room because Bob collected toys and everything. She used to love to go and said, "You know, honey, because I never had a childhood." I said, "But you know, Annie, look what childhood you had. Look at the career you've had.
Right.
The people you've worked with. Fred Astaire, all these people." I said, "Come on, Ann, this is just," she said, "Isn't it like you to always make something good out of everything?" But I said, "It's true. So you didn't have toys and dolls and that kind of thing, but look what you had instead."
Yeah. Much of which is still documented and still exists out there.
And she was a lovely, lovely woman and very funny.
Yeah.
And we had a great time together.
And she remained kind of like, it feels like at such a peak level throughout her life, throughout her career. It's kind of amazing.
She had hurt her foot and she had to take a little vacation. And she had a house in Sedona. And she was talking to me about it. And I said, "So how's your heel?" She said, "Oh, honey," she said, "I had such a hard time." She said, "And I found this Indian doctor. And he took me out to the desert, to this little swamp area, and they used to put my foot into the mud. And then my secretary, Debbie, we'd all three pray over my foot to get it better." And she said, "And I realized, my God, I'm paying for a limo to go out there and do all of that, plus paying him? What the hell? It's just mud." So I said, "Debbie, come on, we're going to go out there and just get that mud and put it in the bucket." She said, so I got a bucket and I came back, and then I just at home and just stick my foot in that bucket and say, "Come on, let's pray, Debbie, over the foot." I mean, how can you make these stories up?
No, you can't.
So why pay the Indian doctor, pay for a limo, just get the mud, bring it back here, and let me watch TV and put my foot in it.
She became the Indian doctor.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you. What a case she was. And, of course, the funny story in this is dear Glenn Roven, who was the youngest conductor on Broadway. He was in his teens when he was conducting. He was so talented. He's left us now, but God, is he great. And Ann loved him. And she had a board put outside her dressing room, and she would put on her tap shoes, and she would warm up on that board tapping.
Wow.
And it was Passover, and Glenn is Jewish, and so she's tapping away, and Glenn passed by, and he said, "Hey, Ann, what are you doing for Passover?" She said, "Honey, I never do those game shows." She kept tapping. That's Glenn Roven's story. Now you'll hear that story from a lot of people. But that's the real story, and Glenn Roven told it to me.
Oh, my God.
Because he was joking with her about being Jewish and Passover. She's obviously not Jewish.
Yeah, right, of course.
So there you go.
So how long were you in 42nd Street for?
8 years.
Right.
The reason being, I like having a paycheck.
Yeah.
And 42nd Street was great for me because I was doing a lot of press, meeting a lot of wonderful people, and it was a big hit show. And I was enjoying my life and my relationship with Bob because we had consistency. And then I did commercials. I did a lot of television shows for Alex Cohen, which we taped on Monday night on our night off. And also I was in good shape because I was getting a workout 8 times a week.
Right.
That's what the theater is.
Right.
And also 42nd Street had such wonderful songs. I never tired of those songs. They were wonderful. And also we had a different audience every night.
Yeah.
And I was very grateful to have that job, and my philosophy has always been you don't leave a hit show because they're seldom in the business.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
they afford you to, and I have a brownstone. I come on, it was a great thing for me. So having that consistency is important, and you don't leave it until you have something better to do.
Yeah.
You know, I was offered the lead in Cage Aux Folles.
Yeah.
Because of Jerry Herman. And it's a great part.
Yeah.
And they were changing theaters from the Palace to the Mark Hellinger. And they were going to do a big publicity campaign. And I was going to be the youngest person to ever play it. And I was going to dance and show my legs. And when Jerry had written a whole different lacage thing for me, where I was going to do impressions. And it was going to be a big deal. And so I handed him my notice. And went into rehearsal. I was costumed. I was even advertised on the side of a bus.
Wow.
And get into rehearsal at the end of the first week, they posted the closing notice.
Wow.
And there I was on Times Square with a feather boa and high heels going, "Hello, sailor." So there we were. But then the good thing is, I mean, I was without a job now.
Yeah, right.
But
After
the good
8
thing
years.
was I got to do it at Paper Mill Playhouse with the original sets and my original costumes.
Who directed that production?
Oh God, he was the production stage manager, and I loved him, and I can't think of his name right now. Give me a moment.
Yeah, no worries.
We'll have to look it up. But he was the production stage manager, Arthur. James Pentecost. I think his name was Jim Pentecost.
Jim Pentecost?
Jim Pentecost.
You looking it up, Chris?
And so, Jim Pentecost. So we had the original stuff.
Yeah.
With him, and then Arthur came out,
Yeah.
and he didn't really adjust it, but by that time I made up my mind what to do.
Yeah.
And it's just that we're going to do different things, and Jim was collaborative with me,
Yeah.
and Jerry also came and gave me some notes. Jerry Herman,
Right.
because Jerry
Like what?
said,
What were his notes?
Jerry said, "Leroy, you are so strong. You've got to be a little more effeminate," and it was a good note.
Yeah.
And so I did. And I loved doing the show.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of productions of Lacage. It became a staple.
Yeah.
I did the 10th anniversary tour of it.
Oh.
I did it down in San Jose. I did it in Florida. I did it a lot of places. It's a great part and a great show.
And shortly after that, you became the first replacement for Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was before.
Oh, that was before?
That was before.
I see. Okay.
Lumiere happened during the time that I directed the road tour of Hello Dolly. That all happened simultaneously. Now, a good thing about Beauty and the Beast, I got a call to audition. I hadn't seen the show.
Yeah.
So they got me a ticket and I went to see it.
Yeah.
And then they gave me the song Be Our Guest.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to do it at the audition. And I had 2 days. And I said, that's ridiculous. I'm going to sing a song I've never sung before, try to remember the lyrics, and I don't have the staging. And Gary Beach got a Tony nomination, and they know the show, and Susan Stroman knows the choreography. They're all going to be there, and I'm going to come up and try to perform this song I've never done, try to remember the lyrics. And I said, I went in to the audition, and I said, I got the song. I said, but I can't perform it for you because I don't know it well. Now, I can read it if you want that, but I said, I'd rather perform a song I know in the style of what it is in the show, and I would rather do that. And so they said, well, okay.
Right.
So I did Light the candles, get the ice out, roll the rug up. It's today, though it may not be anyone's birthday. And I pranced around and did it, and that was it.
Yeah, I'd give you the job too.
Yeah,
So
right.
that was it. And so anyway, now a good story about Beauty and the Beast. One of the bigwigs, I don't mention the name, he's no longer there, came in and felt that my French accent was not correct. And I know what they wanted. They wanted someone to imitate Marie Chevalier, which I was not going to do. So I said, well, what do you want me to do? They said, well, we're sending you to the dialect person at Juilliard. I said, great, be glad to go. So I went in, and it was a woman, and I read the script, and she said, why are you here? I said, they don't think that my French accent is good enough. She said, it is. It's perfect. I said, well, so what do I do? I said, well, just write me a note. And so I took it back to the stage, and I said, now, this is from the Juilliard teacher. My accent is absolutely correct. Now, the next time you cast this part, you ask that someone do a cheap imitation of Marie Chevalier, because that's what you think is a French accent. I don't do that. So at the end of the year, obviously I left but the cast was great.
Did they start to ask that?
What?
Like to do the impression? Is that what you meant? Like you left the
No,
show? Oh,
but
okay.
I knew that's whoever the person who gave the note, that's what they wanted.
Right.
Marie Chevalier.
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
wouldn't want to do that.
Right.
I don't want to imitate Marie Chevalier.
We had Mark Hobie on, who runs Paper Mill Playhouse, and he was in the actually no, he wasn't in the original company. He was also, I think, in the replacement cast at the same time. Yeah. Well, anyway, so he was in the ensemble, and he had mentioned that at the time nobody had wanted to audition for Beauty and the Beast because it was this. Well, it was this. The people thought it was going to be like this park show. They didn't really consider it to be this, high level musical that it became.
Right.
Did you? Where were you at with that when you were going in for it at the time?
Well, I hadn't seen the show.
Yeah. Did you see the movie?
Yes, I had seen the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and of course I know Jerry Orbach.
Yeah, right. Of course.
And I know Joanne Worley. I know Angela Lansbury.
Yeah.
I know Paige O'Hara. I know Richard White. I know everybody in the fucking show. I loved it. I loved the movie.
Yeah.
And when I saw the show, I loved the show. I thought it was beautifully done.
Right.
Set, costumes, performance, and also the message that it had to say made me cry.
Yeah.
I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful show.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be in it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting then, I got the part.
Yes.
And I go into rehearsal with a stage manager who's got his book. Now you go over to 2 and you have to raise your hand and you turn on the gas with your thumb. Then you press the thing button as you say, and then I went, I can't work like this. I didn't have any actors. So I'm trying to work and do the thing, and of course mechanically doing the thing. And of course you can't rehearse in it because you have to pay a stagehand. Because you can't use that stuff without the...
Right.
So I was at a big disadvantage, and I was in a room with a stage manager all the time and no actors to work with.
Right.
So then I said, so Leroy, what do you want to do? And I said, the only way I'm going to learn this is just to put me on. I have to have people to work with. I can't do it. And so that's what they did. And then they had a rehearsal with the cast for me, and which was okay, but still without all the...
Yeah.
And then I had a run-through on stage.
Oh, that's nice.
Because it's very,
complicated.
The things moving, yeah. So that night, I still didn't know quite what I was doing. And Bob wanted to come and see. And I said, Bob, don't come and see it till I know what I'm doing. It's going to take... The show's been running. I said, I'll just take my time and we'll look at the actors and do what actors do. So that night, getting ready to do my first performance at the Palace Theater again.
Oh, wow. Look at that, huh?
And I played the Palace 5 times.
Wow.
So anyway, I'm sitting looking at myself in the mirror, and I said, Leroy, you're 52 years old, and you have a candle on your head. So I've got these big, heavy things, which your hands can't come out of. You can't get your hands out. Right. So the dresser has to be with you all the time. In case you have to blow your nose or, whatever. So thank God, and I had a fabulous dresser. He was just heaven. And so anyway, I'm trying to figure out the hands and everything. So I thought, no, I'm just going to relax tonight. I'm going to treat this as a dress rehearsal. I'm going to listen to the actors, take my time. I'm walking upstairs with these big plastic feet. I'm going up, and one of the kids said, oh, Leroy, isn't it exciting? Barbara Streisand's in the audience tonight. So I get up, I get on the set, and it starts moving down, and the lights, and there she is, 6th row on the aisle. Behind her is Bob.
Oh, my goodness.
I thought, Jesus. And so at one point I got on stage and said, Leroy, you're on. I said, where? They said, your hands, you haven't turned off the fire. So anyway, it was a mess. But anyway, I finally got it and then began to know. And then the original director came. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
And he
I'm not
came.
sure I know his name either.
And I didn't work with him. I never saw him.
Wow.
He came back and said, Leroy, I don't know what to tell you. I just keep writing down, sexy, 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 sexy. I said, well, let me tell you something about that. In rehearsal, I did a sexual innuendo, and your stage manager said, now, Leroy, you can't do that. This is a Disney show.
Yeah.
I said, so you need to talk to your stage manager about the direction because you didn't direct me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I found my own way, and the cast was terrific.
Yeah.
I made
Robert
buddies
Jess
with...
What was his name?
Robert Jess Roth.
Robert Jess Roth
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
was the original director.
Didn't direct me, honey.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, maybe a nice guy, but he got lucky.
Yeah.
But also, great actors to work with.
Yeah.
Cass Morgan, Jeff McCarthy,
Oh, right.
Mark Kudish.
Mark Kudish, who we just reached out to Mark.
And the gal who played Belle. Oh, and I love her so much.
Susan Egan.
She replaced Susan Egan. She was in Light in the Piazza. She played a part. Who?
Not Kelly O'Hara. No, not Kelly.
No. And Stacey Logan, who played the Flame, and Sarah Uriarty. I love Sarah Uriarty, and she was Belle. She used to come in and warm up with me every night. I just adored her.
Yeah.
And that cast, we were buddies.
And I'm sure you at 52 were dancing up a storm doing that show, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In that hot costume too.
But had I done the show originally, it would have been a little different because what happens in the show, Gary was not a dancer, and doing the show, you start off be our guest, and it suddenly becomes her number.
Yes.
So you get lost in the end. Where had I been there originally, I think it would have been more dancing,
right.
And I would have been more involved in the machinations of the number with her,
right,
because I was a dancer.
Yeah.
But
instead you were
and they never
hosting it.
adjusted to me.
Yeah,
I never did anything. I did exactly what had been taught before.
Yeah.
And that's what you do when you replace.
And you were more hosting the number, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't like to replace. I've done it twice, and it was both Gary Beach.
Oh, really?
And the second one was that the producers.
The producers, which was the next thing I was going to ask you about.
Yeah.
So the producers, it's a completely different thing. You're doing, like you said, a lot of the things that you're doing with these put-ins is that you're doing them alone. Did you get to work with Mel Brooks during your time with the producers?
A little bit, but not creative. We're just doing what everyone did before.
Okay.
And another story about my audition for that.
Yeah.
I'm being called in for the producers.
Yeah.
And again, they give me hire myself to learn and perform.
Yeah.
And my agent said, now listen, Leroy, you can't go in there and do what you do. You can't go in there and tell them what you want to do. You've got to do what they tell them. I said, all right, I will. Yeah. So I went and did the same thing. I walked in, and thank God Mel was there because I knew Mel, because I had danced with Anne Bancroft on her special. Yeah. So Mel was there, and I love him, and I think he's one of the funniest men ever. So I go in, and I knew Susan not well, but I knew her, and of course the casting directors are there. Yeah. And so I did the same thing. Story. I said, look, I can sing the song for you. I can't perform it. And Gary Beach got a Tony Award. Susan, you know the choreography? I don't. How am I going to compete with that? So please, will you let me do something I know in the style? And Mel said, just do what you want to do, Lee. Just do it. So I said, I had a dream about you, Adolf. That was it. Mel screamed, and I got the part.
Oh my goodness, that is great. That was all. That was all.
That was it.
Just that one line.
That was it.
Wow.
Oh, but then I had to read. I mean, I had to read a couple.
Yeah. But that was the song.
Yeah.
But you said the casting directors weren't too crazy about that. Yeah.
Were you nervous to do it?
No.
Or you knew it was gonna land.
Because I would have
been more nervous trying to sing the song, remember the lyrics, and try to perform it.
Yeah.
It's something I don't know.
That is a risky thing to do.
But then also what happened, it's very hard being a replacement because they really want you to do exactly what the other person did.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with that, and I know that the stage manager said to me, now Leroy, when you make your entrance, you're very insecure about Rodgers wearing this dress, and he doesn't know whether he's going to win the contest. And Carmen made this dress, and I said, well, Carmen didn't make the dress. He lives with all these people. He's a rich gay man whose family said, get him out of here and put him in New York where no one will notice. He lives in a townhouse. All the people are there, and the number they come out. That's the joke.
Yeah.
He's not insecure. He wins the contest every year because everybody caters to him because he's rich.
Right.
He's the one that says, I'm not pretty, am I? Am I not pretty? Oh, you're gorgeous. That's the kind of person.
Yeah.
And when he walks in, he wants the attention. That's why he looks at Leo. And, every man thinks I'm gorgeous. And that's what makes the tension. That's what it's about. And I said, Carmen didn't make the dress. The costumer lives in the building. They're all there in that number. So that's what it is. And I'm in control. And I'm walking around, and I'm a man in a dress.
Right.
And they wanted to put me in tights, and I said, no, I want my hairy legs to show because I'm a man in a dress. And that's what Leo sees. My God, and I've got hair on my chest. So that's what it is.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And he's in complete control. And of course, Max will do anything to get him, and Leo has just never seen anything like this in his life. And when I throw my dress up to go upstage, I'm going to wear, my underpants.
Yeah.
It's a man in a dress.
You're right.
And they kept on me and kept giving me notes. And I went to Mel, and Mel said, no, hair is funny. Hairy legs is funny. And that was it.
So it's so funny because this is kind of a little bit of what we were discussing, and some of it has to do with what you mentioned with Dolly. These intentions or the ideas of these original creatives, they are flexible, right? I mean, there is a lot of room to play, and also there's a constant misinterpretation of what they had wanted. You know what I mean? I mean, you talk about that with Jerry and Dolly, or with Mel in this case, or in Robert's case with Beauty and the Beast. It's like these people who are taking over for them are not necessarily, they're trying to match things the way that they were, but not leaving room for flexibility, when in truth, these creatives would have preferred the room to let the show grow.
You see, whenever they replace, you're not put in by the original director. They come to look at it afterward and then give you a lot of notes, but you've been practicing your mistakes then.
Yeah.
So, and it's the stage manager's job for you to do it the way it's done.
Yes.
It's not their job to really redo it without the original creative people. I mean, that's the juxtaposition of being in that position.
Right.
So you can't really blame the stage managers. They're doing what the other person did.
Right.
But at the same time, there's no creativity. And every time I've directed Dolly, every one of those women were totally different.
Right.
And I knew things that made it work, but you have to work with that person to find it.
Right.
And I know that and the Chrysler Building dress, he says, I think I look more like the Chrysler Building. And I was told, just face front and become the Chrysler Building. Well, I did that, and I didn't get one fucking response. So the next time I said, I feel like the Chrysler Building. And I got the laugh.
And one little thing works like that.
And I got
It's
a
kind of
note about
amazing.
it. I said, I'm sorry. The laugh is more important than,
Yeah, for
And
sure.
that's the way it is.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think is the most important part in terms of getting that laugh? Like, what do you think when it comes to doing comedy, especially on stage? There are nuances of you making it your own, but what would you say is the crux of getting that laugh?
It depends on the person who's doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll give you a good example with Madeline Kahn in the hat shop scene. At the end of Motherhood, she says, so you see, Mr. Vandergelder, there can possibly be a man in that cupboard. And of course he sneezes. And Carol Channing looked right at the audience and went, God bless you. Which of course got the laugh. Madeline couldn't do that.
Right.
And I said, well, Madeline, we've got time today. Let's play. Let's instinctively you do it, and let's see what happens. She said, okay, let me think for a while. She said, okay, I got it. I said, now do it. So she said, so you see, Mr. Vandergelder, there can possibly be a man in that cupboard. Ah, chew. She looked at Vandergelder. She said, God bless you. As if he was the one who sneezed. And he became befuddled. I said, it's the laugh.
Yeah.
I don't care how we got it as long as I get the result.
Right.
That's your way of doing it, and it works.
Right.
They'll laugh.
And it's still true to the text.
Yeah. Another thing with Madeline, I use her as an example because I loved her so much, and she was so brilliant. And in the opening number, she has a line that says, varicose veins reduced, and Call on Dolly. And she said, I can't say that. I said, what do you mean you can't say that? It's in the script. She said, well, you know what they are? I said, yeah, I know what they are. Well, she said, they're disgusting. That's not funny. I said, Madeline, it's not that what they are, it's the sound of the words. Varicose veins reduced. It's got a tempo to it, and they'll laugh. It's just done that. She said, well, I can't do that. I said, well, Mike Stewart's dead. He'll never know. So you think of another thing that so she went home. She called her therapist. She called her mother. She came back in the next day at rehearsal, and she said, "Okay, I got it. I've got a list of things. Facial warts." I said, "Madeline, that is disgusting." And I said, "But you know what? I got an idea. Brassiere is a funny word. Brassiere is a funny. The girl is heavy set." I said, "So why don't you flip the card over and look at her and go, Brassiere's reinforced?" And she said, "Well, that's not funny." I said, "I'll make a deal with you. Tomorrow at rehearsal, you do it that way, and if the cast laughs, it's in." She said, "It's a deal." We shook. Of course, they all screamed, and that was it.
You had another Madeline story?
Yeah, Madeline Kahn. I was going to direct a production down at Theater of the Stars in Atlanta.
Oh, yeah,
Chris
of course.
Manos.
Sure.
And Madeline Kahn is starring. So Jerry Herman and I and Madeline met at his townhouse on the east side to get acquainted. Mm-hmm. And Madeline and I are only a couple of months apart. We're the same age. And she had great hair, and I just love her. And so at our meeting, I said, "Madeline, I have 10 days to do this show. Yeah. I know it very well.
Yeah.
And if you don't come into rehearsal off book, you're never going to get through it. Because we're not going to have time for you to learn the lines plus learn all the business. So you've got to come in off book." And she did. And John Schuck was playing Vandergelder. Mm-hmm. So the first day I just wanted to work with the two of them, because that way if I give them things to do, especially in the eating scene, which is like choreographing, with all the props, if I can get that written down, they can get everything, they can practice on the side while I do the rest of the show. So in the eating scene, there's the line, "Horace Vandergelder, you go your way and I go mine." And this is the direction for it. She says, "Horace Vandergelder, you go your way and I'll go mine." And Madeline said, "I don't do bits." And I said, "Well, Madeline, let me explain it to you. You're playing Kansas City, the Municipal Opera, in St. Louis, 10,000 people a night on a hillside. And the first row of people are at least 15 to 20 feet away from you. And you can say it and mean it, or you can do this, but they're not going to be able to see it. You have to do as part of it. But I will give you a reason for doing it. A woman does not eat in her gloves. You go your way and I'll go mine. Then you take off your gloves." And she said, "Okay." So we go on in the scene and the lines repeated. I said, "Now it's the reverse this time. You go your way and I go mine." She says, "Well, then what's my motivation this time? I don't have on gloves." I said, "But you have a serving fork and knife where you're serving the food. You keep it in your hands, you click them, and then you sit them down." She said, "That was cheap." And I said, "You got your fucking motivation, didn't you?" And what you just did is what she did.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was it.
And that's it. Oh my gosh.
That was it.
Talk about getting the laugh, huh? It's the little things.
And then we went out to dinner every night, and I could talk to her through dinner and give all the backstory, all the knowledge I have about Dolly, because she's that kind of an actress. Yeah. And she told me during that dinner one night, she said, "You know, when I did the Young Frankenstein," she said, Mel said, "Now listen, when Frankenstein is stripping you, you've got to sing something." I said, "Well, what do you want me to sing?" She said, "Oh, I care, Marilyn, just sing something." So she said, "I went home and I'm laying in bed thinking about Frankenstein fucking me." And she said, I'm going, "Oh yeah, Frankie, oh, you do it, oh baby, oh, ah, 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 sweet mystery of life at last." That's a song. So she said, I go in the next day. She said, "Mel," he said, "I don't care what you sing, just sing something." And of course, it's history.
Oh my God.
But that's Madeline, you see.
Yeah.
And she told me when, I can go on now with Madeline forever because it's worth it. She was so divine. And we worked on everything. And then we finally have the dress rehearsal with only piano, but full sets of costumes for the first time. Mm-hmm. So we do that, and it comes time for the Dolly number, and she said, "I can't go out there." I said, "What do you mean you can't go out there?" She said, I said, "The ramp lights up, Madeline." And I said, "I'm going to walk you out with me. Come with me. I'm going to walk it through with you. Don't be afraid." So we go out. She said, "Levi, I feel like I'm going, there she is, Miss America." I said, "Madeline, it's the Harmonia Gardens. In the audience, there's Mrs. O'Reilly, Mr. Schwartz. Hey, it's Dolly. I'm back." I said, And I walked with her doing that. And comes to opening night. Now the next afternoon, we had the full orchestra. But I made her wear her costumes, no one else, because they couldn't get them ready for the show. So she's doing the show for the first time that night with critics.
Oh, boy.
So first time she's doing it with an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And she comes out and they do the first number and, of course, a call on Dolly. And they call on, and Ambrose Kemper comes out and says, Mrs. Levi. And she goes, Mr. Kemper, to the audience, the artists. And he says, Mrs. Levi, the train for younger adults. So anyway, opening. The kid comes out local. She goes out, call on Mrs. Levi. She says, Mr. Kemper, the artist. He went up in his line. She said, don't say another word, Mr. Kemper. I know exactly what you want to know. You want to know why the train for Yonkers? Well, let me tell you. I went back at intermission and kissed her full up on the mouth. And I said, do you know how fucking brilliant you are?
Yeah.
You didn't bat an eyelash. You were so... And it was just brilliant.
Yeah.
And then the next stop was St. Louis, and they wouldn't pay to have me go. So I didn't go. And Madeline called me the next day, and I said, how'd it go, Madeline? She said, well, you know, Paul Blake had them bring out the Budweiser wagon with me on it, you know, instead of the one we had. She said, of course, the horses shit and pissed all over the floor. We were laughing. She said, I hope you're not angry with me. I threw something in. I said, what did you do? She said, on the Dolly number, you go, I hear the ice dance. She went, I hear the, sweet mystery of life, at last I found you. As a counter thing. And I said, Jerry would pee his pants, leave it in. She said, what's the song of the period? I said, it's also you.
Yeah.
And the people who get it will laugh, and the people who don't will know the difference.
And all of a sudden, she does bits.
Yeah. And the story goes on. So now she comes to the production I directed, Carol, in the second revival. She was invited. And at intermission, she grabbed me. She said, was I that good? I said, and many times better. So we had that kind of relationship. And I went to see Sisters Rosenzweig. And she didn't know I was there because I didn't know whether she would want to know and make her nervous. And by some coincidence, Carol Channing and her husband were there.
Oh, wow.
So we all went backstage together. Madeline saw me. I'm bragging now, but it's the truth. And Madeline saw me. She ran and screamed and grabbed me. And I said, do you know how wonderful you are in this play? And she said, quote, I am wonderful in this play because I worked with you last summer. Because for the first time in my life and my career, I had confidence. Because everything we rehearsed got a laugh every performance. I've never had that kind of confidence before. And I said, and I'll tell you what, my friend, you're going to win the Tony Award, and don't you dare let Jane Alexander put you in the featured category. Night of the Tonys. 12 o'clock midnight. The phone rings, I pick it up, the noise, she says, hi, honey, I called my mother first. And when she passed, she married at the very end because she knew she was going to go. And her husband called me and said, we'd like you to sit with the family at the memorial service because Madeline loved you so much. And I loved her. And it was one of the joys of my life to have gone through that creative process working. And she wasn't a funny person. Everyone thought she was like a comic. Madeline was a very serious, she had a great sense of humor, but she was a very serious woman. I truly, truly loved her. And I thank God for that creative experience in 10 days of giving her Dolly and what happened as a result of it. It was a love affair.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about Dolly at the Wick. Was there how did this come about, and was there any criticism to the idea at first of a man playing Dolly?
Not necessarily. Marilyn Wick, I had done La Cage there. Yeah. So she knew me, and so she trusted me. And when she talked about Dolly, I said, Marilyn, why not let me do it? Let's do something new, because I'm the first equity actor to play Hello Dolly in America. Yeah. The guy did it in London, and I can't think of his name now. I will eventually. He was Danny LaRue. And it wasn't very good, I hear, from other people who saw it. But I knew the show, and I wanted to have that experience of playing Dolly. I'd done it with so many people. Leslie Uggams,
oh my gosh,
Joanne Worley, Nicole Croisset in Paris, Michelle Lee, Randy Graff. You know, all these different, so different, you know. And I wanted to do it myself, so Marilyn said, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
And and we did it. I didn't know it at the time, or I wouldn't have done it with tracks. And she didn't tell me that, because when we did La Cage, we did it with an orchestra.
Oh.
So had I known that, I wouldn't have done it. But the conductor I'd worked with, and he said, Leroy, you're going to love the tracks because they've got a lot of violins. And I said, I will try it. And if I'm not happy, you're going to have to replace me. And I could work with the tracks.
Wow.
It didn't bother me at all.
Wow.
And and of course I had Louis Stadlin, my buddy, playing Vandergelder, who's one of the most brilliant actors I've ever worked with in my life. And we have a great love for one another. We had a ball. But it was very hard directing myself because I couldn't stand out technically. There's so much to do, and they weren't equipped to handle a lot of the technical stuff. So it took me a few performances of just technically getting through it before I could get my bearings. But,
so you directed that production as
yeah,
well?
I also directed
wow,
it.
you directed and starred as Dolly.
Yeah, it's hard. And then I realized later, because I never got to see it, that I should have had some placements more front, because I got too into acting with Louis. But and we had a success with it, and I loved doing it, and it was and again, it's in the history books now to break the barriers.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
I didn't play it as a man or a drag queen.
Yeah.
I played the character. I put on the dress, put on the wig, and became the character. And Louis Stadlin said to me, he said, Leroy, this is the strangest things. I know you so well. But he said, you got dressed up and you put on that dress and you came out. And he said, suddenly you were Dolly Levi.
Yeah.
You know, not being in rehearsal where he said it was just incredible.
Yeah.
You became Dolly Levi.
Right.
And that's the purpose of acting.
Yeah.
To play those parts, and it's such a great show.
Yeah.
As Carol Cook said, you could put an orangutan in a red dress coming down and they'd applaud.
Yeah,
So,
coming
you
down
know,
the stairs. It's iconic.
It's a great.
Yeah.
And I love the play.
Yeah. So talk to me about these 54 Below shows. This is such an exciting thing that you're doing now, and you've done so many of them. Talk to me about.
No, I just want.
Yeah.
I have to go back to Dolly because I thought of one thing I wanted to
Yeah.
hear.
Go for it.
I got someone had sent me a thing where on Facebook where somebody had written, I saw Leroy Reams do Dolly at the Wick Theater. I didn't like it because he played it like a real woman. Best review I got.
That's the best compliment you could ever get.
Best review
right.
I got.
So you were going-
Because they expected,
Right.
you know, to do a drag queen thing.
Yeah,
which,
yeah,
you know,
right.
So anyway, now
That's
we can-
interesting.
Yeah,
That's
we'll
interesting.
jump on.
No, but so talk to me about these 54 Below shows. What was the inspiration behind doing them? And then we'll get into specifically Uncensored and the inspiration behind that.
Well, you want to talk about Uncensored?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I do shows at 54 Below because I like it, and I like the people there, and they have great technical staff.
Yeah.
Amanda and Becky, and it used to be KJ, and I mean KJ, and now it's Yuri. Yoni. I'm sorry, he's new.
worries.
Yoni, I didn't want to get his name right. Yoni. And when they asked me to do something, I said, you know what I would like to do? I would like to do an evening and talk about my sexuality. Because with all that's happening in our business now, and transsexuals and transgender and all this stuff going on, I said, I've lived a part of history. Mm-hmm. And when I was told I played the first openly gay character, the first male to play Dolly in America, I said, I think it's time to talk about that, and I'd like to do a show about it.
Right.
And my sexuality. Because many things have happened in my life from my growing up, going through dance school, and doing the hula when I was 10 years old in drag, and going on a TV show and doing a girl when I was 10 years old. And I never worried about it. It was just, playing a character. And I'd like to go there and what it was like being a homosexual before we started being called gay.
Right.
So I started thinking back, and I became open about my sexuality.
Wow.
And I remember when I turned 18, I got a letter from the draft in Kentucky, and I had to fill out this form. And on the form was the question, are you a homosexual? Yes, no. And my mother was there when I was filling it out, and she said, you put yes. because your father and your 3 brothers went into the war and you're not going in. Because, during, Vietnam and all that stuff.
Right.
She said, and you are not going in. You're not going to go, and you check yes. And I sat there, and my mother never thought of my sexuality. That's not what she thought.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I thought, now this is important. This is a government document. So am I going to lie and say no? And am I going to be ashamed of being a homosexual, although I wasn't really out that much?
Sure.
And I said, no, I am what I am. And I checked yes. And it was very freeing for me.
Oh, I'm sure.
Now, as far as sex was concerned, as I say in my act, I'm from Kentucky. Growing up, if you're not near the boy you love the girl you're near. If you're not near the girl you love, there's the cow and the sheep. So that's, and guys, people want to talk about sexuality when you're a kid. Kids play with one another and do things. And in the period where I grew up, you didn't do things like that to the girls. That was bad. You get in trouble for trying to have sex with a girl. You waited till you got married and you were virgin. We were brought up that way with all the religion and all this stuff. But, things are working down there. And, I tell this story, but it's what started me on this. I was 6 years old. And in Covington, and next door to us, was a single mother with a son my age. And that's when TV came out, and we didn't have a TV. And they had a TV. And so he would take me out behind our garage, pull his pants down, rub up against me. Then we'd go in and watch Howdy Doody. And I know the Howdy Doody song. So it felt good. Uh-huh. So I didn't have a big thing about it,
Sure.
And then it graduates into other things. And I had sex with my 2 male cousins, my age. And they're both straight. They're not gay. And I didn't know what really gay or homosexual was. It's something that we just didn't, talk about.
Yeah.
And, we got together, we did things. We didn't kiss. And we didn't complete the act,
Right.
We gave her that old hand jive, and that was it. But I was having sex with my 2 cousins.
Oh my gosh.
When they're straight, they're now great-grandfathers and all that. We just didn't talk about it.
Yeah, right.
So, to me, it was all rather kind of innocent in a way, and it felt good.
Yeah.
And so, there you go. And then I'm in shorthand class, and then once I danced in school, then that was it. Homo, cocksucker, queer, all the name-calling, the bullying.
Sure.
Because I danced, but the girls protected me.
What was it that, if you don't mind me asking, helped you to come out then? Was it...
Well,
Did you already come out of Kentucky? No.
I was never in, you see.
Yeah.
That's part of it. I just became, you learn, because my father, my brothers, my mother, no one ever talked to me about sex.
Yeah.
No one.
Right.
I learned just by being with other people my age. It wasn't an older man or anything salacious like that. It was my cousins. We were close at the same age.
Yeah.
And when you get into puberty, it comes up every month. I didn't know what a climax was till I had one.
Sure.
And I got up and had a wet dream and thought, thank God I could figure out that I had with some disease. Mm-hmm. And then it felt good to do it, and you do. You start masturbating, which everybody does. They make that sound like you're going to go blind if you... come on, relax. It's part of growing into an adult. And you do it with people where you feel safe, and it feels good to do it. And no kissing. It wasn't emotional, you see. It was just getting off.
Sure.
And so that's the way it was. And then I go away to college.
Yeah.
And I'm a little more knowing what's going on, but not necessarily doing it. And I'm just telling you the story now. Now you don't have to see my act.
No, we still do.
I'm telling you the story. So what happened, we did a production of South Pacific, my freshman year. And the guy who played Emile DeBeck was a junior, who was a football player.
Yeah.
And I had one look at him, and my heart stood still. And then I knew that it was something more than just having sex. And I tried out for Lieutenant Cable. Didn't get it because I was, freshman. And of course, a senior got the part.
Right.
And he was very good, by the way. I'm not knocking him.
Yeah.
But because I was a dancer, I choreographed the show. Mm-hmm. And so at the closing party, the girl playing Bloody Mary, her fiance was there, and he lived in Kentucky, and I commuted to school. So she asked me if I would drive him to the bus station. I said, sure. And so we're driving over. He said, I'd like to stop and get a beer.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't drink. He said, well, just stop. I'll get a beer. I'll take it out and pull over in the park and I'll drink it there.
Okay.
So we pulled over and one thing led to another and he grabbed me and kissed me. I'd never had a male kiss me before that. Now, it wasn't like the violins went off, like it was some enchanted evening. I barely knew him.
Yeah.
It was just different. It wasn't, and I kissed a girl, and I mean, to jump back now when I was a senior, and in shorthand class, the girls were talking about French kissing. I knew what it was. I'd never done it. And I said, oh, come on, you don't let boys put their tongues in your mouth, do you? And I remember the gal, Rondella Craig. You love that name, Rondella? And she said, Leroy, it's the only adult way to kiss. So on the senior prom, I picked out a nice, clean girl in the upper class who was in the upper class, put a corsage on her, took out and stuck my tongue in her mouth. So that's how I learned. Again, the violins weren't playing, but
Yeah, right.
at least I learned that's what you do.
You guys were singing Some Enchanted Evening on stage, but that wasn't necessarily the case
That's
backstage.
right. So here I am now with Bloody Mary's fiance, and he gave me a big kiss, and then he went down on me, and he completed the act. I'd never had that happen. I thought to myself, thank God he kissed me before he did that. I wouldn't want him kissing me after that. But anyway, that was the first. Now I'm going to make you all go crazy. Then I go to summer stock because our professor...
I'm just hearing that. I think I'm laughing more because I'm hearing Some Enchanted Evening.
Yeah, well, and I sing that in the evening, by the way. Not Some Enchanted Evening, but this nearly was mine. So you're getting my act tonight. So anyway, the guy playing Lieutenant Cable couldn't go do the summer stock again. It was in Maxinkuckee, Indiana, the Maxinkuckee Playhouse. And so since I was the runner-up, I got the part.
Yeah.
And so I was going to be playing opposite, Mr. Football.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say his name.
Sure.
And I had a huge crush on him.
Yeah.
So I got this big crush on
Yeah.
the football player playing Emile de Beck.
Yeah.
And in our scene, in the second act, of course, I sing You've Got to Be Taught. And then he sings This Nearly Was Mine. And so every night, I just pretended he was singing that to me.
Yeah.
And such a crush. And when we said goodbye, he kissed me. And the violins did sound at that. But it was innocent enough. Goodbye. And we go back to school the next year. He's a senior, I'm a sophomore.
Yeah.
And the musical that year was Guys and Dolls. Again, no part for me except Adelaide, and they weren't brave enough to let me do it. But I choreographed it. And at that closing party, and this is really the truth, and I didn't drink. And he said, Leroy, you shouldn't really be driving home tonight. We've all been drinking. Well, I hadn't. He said, and my roommate is away, and so you can stay in the dorm with me. And I said, well, I'll call my mother and tell her not. So we went to the dorm, and there were bunk beds in the dorm. And I crawled into the lower bunk bed. He went in the bathroom, came back, laid down on top of me. And when I put my arms around him, he said, we can't do this. This is not right. He jumped back on the top bunk. Well, I was a wreck. And so the next morning, of course, it was, oh, boy, was I drunk last night, And we were going to go audition to do summer stock and get our equity cards. Well, I got the job, he didn't, and we were going to room together. And it would have happened then. And not that he was gay, I'm not saying that.
Sure.
But there was an attraction and a curiosity, not on my part, but I think perhaps on his. And so then at the closing party of Guys and Dolls, he kissed me goodbye. And I wrote him a letter. And I said, I think that what is between us is something deeper than friendship, and I would like to explore it. And he wrote back and said, I don't know what you're talking about. If it's homosexuality, I don't condemn it, but I also don't condone it. That was it. It was over. Now, I'm fading to going out of town with Sweet Charity.
Yeah.
We're in Detroit, and it's New Year's Eve. And the football player was getting his master's in Michigan. He's from there.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving, and now I had an encounter with one of the guys in Sweet Charity who taught me everything, which I did not know.
Sure.
I got my graduate degree with this guy. I wasn't in love with him, nor he with me.
Sure.
But I knew everything. I had a course. So we're leaving the theater one night, and who's at the door but Mr. Football?
Wow.
And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, you know, I live in Michigan, and I heard you were doing this show. I came to see you. And I said, well? And he said, you know, I didn't make a hotel reservation. Can I stay with you tonight? And, you know, I had my Norma Shearer moment. My act I'm doing for you now, Norma Shearer, you know, from the women, I have my pride. I don't condemn homosexuality, but I also don't condone it.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was my attitude. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, you can stay in my hotel room, I'll stay with my friend here. So the next day we had breakfast, and he was telling me that he had met this girl in school, and he was thinking about getting married. And I said, you sound like you're buying a new car. I said, you never said I've fallen in love. And he said, well, that goes for it. So, you know, and we exchanged Christmas cards for a long time after that, and then nothing.
Yeah.
And fade out. And then I went out to Carol Cook's memorial service in California. That's a couple of years ago. And I stayed with a girlfriend from college. And we were talking about Mr. Football one night. And she said, let's call him. And I said, oh, honey, he may be dead. I mean, it's been decades. She said, come on, let's call him, because I still had the information. So we called, and it was a woman's phone voice, you know. So it obviously had to be, you know, his wife.
Right.
And we left a message. He didn't call back, and the next night he called back. And we put him on speakerphone. And so Jadine and I are chatting about old days and all this and that. And I had to say it before I hung up. I said, you know, of course I still love you. And he said, and I love you. I mean, I love you guys too. And that was it. And prior to that, by the way, he came to see me in The Producers when I was in Vegas. And I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I thought, oh, please, God, make him fat, bald, and ugly. He came back looking gorgeous.
Wow.
And it is what it is.
Yeah,
Unrequited love. And I don't know, listen, I didn't know what I was doing then. It could have been a disaster for both of us. And I would have certainly, and also, if I knew what I was and it wasn't what I expected, you know, it's like Peggy Lee, is that all there is? I don't know, I can't say, but it's those kinds of sexual, and I was a lesbian for a night. You know, I did missionary work. So I've gone through this sexual stuff, and I thought it was important to talk about it openly. It's like going through therapy.
Yeah, sure.
Now, some people are going to be offended.
Sure.
And then some people are going to, it's going to appeal to them because they went through the same things. That's like, you know, coming openly saying I'm gay, so other people can say I'm gay, to lead the way that we can all express ourselves and get on with our lives and be who we are. Yeah. And that's how
the foundation of
Uncensored came
Uncensored.
to be.
So your next performance, we should say, is May 7th. And I imagine you're going to continue to do it throughout, right? At 54 Below every now and then?
Well, not necessarily. It's hard to get an audience.
Sure.
Because, you know, your friends and your associates come in and they've seen it. Yeah. It's hard getting an audience, and people who don't know you, you know.
Yeah. Well, hopefully now this will create some sort of audience.
Well, if they call and to request to tell 54 Below you want to see it.
Yeah. Do it. May 7th, Uncensored, starring Roy Reams.
And then also on June the 3rd, I'm repeating me and Betty, Lauren Becall. Because that was another thing that I was in love with Betty. Yeah. We had a love affair without the sex again. Yeah. But it was such a wonderful friendship. And a lot of people now don't know. The young kids don't know who Lauren Becall was now. But I thought it was important to express what a great friendship I had with her. And a lot of people know her history, and Humphrey Bogart, Frank Sinatra, and all of that. But for me to experience her as Betty Joan Persky from the Bronx. You see, I wanted people to know that person because that's who I knew. And she was so wonderful to me, and up until her death. And I wanted to tell that story to people and have them identify and feel the same way I knew, and get to love her the way I did. And I thought it was very hard musically, because I thought, what songs am I going to get? Because I have to sing songs, and I mean, I could do songs from Applause, which I do, and I thought, well, Woman of the Year, I could do some songs from that. I thought of getting Sidney Meyer and me to do What's So Wonderful? You can make a pot roast. But
yeah.
That
The
had
cooking
nothing
one.
to do with me. That would be so. But then, my God, the songs came.
Yeah.
And I have so many stories.
Yeah.
And sometimes I run longer than I should, but there's so much to tell.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed at that. It's not what I'm going to do, it's what I'm not going to do.
Right.
Because all the material is so personal.
Yeah.
I mean, you're trying to do in an hour and 15 minutes what you've built, decades doing.
Right.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Well, we feel very lucky that you're here telling it to us now. We have
And then in the future, I'm going to do all the show about 42nd Street.
Yes, which you mentioned.
Yeah, but I haven't put that together yet, and I haven't solidified the dates.
Who are you working with? Who's your MD? Is it Alex Rybeck?
Alex Rybeck.
Alex Rybeck is your MD. Very cool. So we have a little segment, and if you're game, we can give this a shot, and we'll see. Maybe we'll cut it, but who knows what'll happen.
No, this is group therapy. I'm to respond to say, what do you think of this? I have to give you an answer.
No.
Is that what you're gonna do
No,
to me?
I'm actually going to make you do a cold read.
Oh,
if that's all right with
I'm
you.
going to cold read?
Yeah, are you interested in that and doing something like
sure,
that?
if I've put on my glasses.
Okay, great. Your glasses are right there.
Yeah.
So, have you ever played with AI at all?
No.
Okay, so
I didn't know what it was until I went and saw that play at Lincoln Center.
The Robert
they kept
Downey
saying
Jr.
AI,
one?
I said, what the fuck is that? And my friend said, Leroy, where do you live? I said, I've never heard it before. What can I tell you?
McNeil. So, essentially, since the podcast is called I Want to Be Like You, we call this segment AI Want to Be Like You. And what we did was we plugged in and asked AI to write a musical starring you. Okay. So the musical is called The King of Claremont Street. And the synopsis goes, in a crumbling old hotel filled with secrets, one eccentric gentleman might just hold the key to everyone's future and his own redemption. Roy Reams stars as Reginald Reggie Lumiere, the flamboyant and endlessly charming live-in concierge of the once grand Hotel Claremont, now on the verge of demolition. I'm playing Otis, a shy maintenance man with a poetic soul. So they wrote a scene for the two of us, and I'll give you your
Sides.
your sides. Yeah, so these are just these 2 pages right here.
Okay.
And you're
My
Reggie.
First reading.
Yep.
BB. Okay.
You're Reggie and I'm Otis. I'll set the
gotcha.
scene. The scene is called The Cake Catastrophe. The Claremont Hotel ballroom 1 hour before a wedding reception. A massive, extravagant cake, which is perfect because we're here at Vincenzo Salvatore Cakes, is teetering on a serving cart. Reggie enters in full regalia. Cravat, pocket square, gloves, and absolute panic. Otis is holding a frosting-covered toolbox.
Why does the wedding cake look like it just went through a custard-based divorce?
Don't yell. The fridge shorted overnight. I tried to refrost it with a spatula and a blow dryer.
A blow dryer? This cake was flown in from Paris and has its own passport, Otis.
Well, now it has third-degree burns and a frosting hernia.
I am going to evaporate. I am going to rise into the chandelier and live there forever like a bitter opera ghost.
He dramatically sits on a chair, fanning himself with his gloves.
This wedding is being paid for by real estate money. These people sue over lukewarm shrimp. Do you understand the litigation? But the litigation potential of a soggy millefeuille, whatever that French word
I
is.
have no idea. We can hide it with flowers. Maybe drape a napkin over the bedside?
Oh, sure. Otis, shall we bedazzle the disgrace? Perhaps we just serve it in the dark. Or better yet, we declare it postmodern. No. Not on my watch. We're going to spin this.
Spin it?
We say it was intentionally distressed, very avant-garde, inspired by the fragility of love. The bride is an art major. The bride is an art major. She'll eat it up like the soggy corner.
You are terrifying when you're calm.
I was trained by nuns and showgirls. I know how to cover disaster with a rhinestone and a prayer. Now, go get me 24 gardenias, a fog machine, and a spotlight. And if this cake is going down, it's going down like Bette Midler at the Tonys.
There it is. Thanks so much for playing. That was so funny. Okay, we have just 2 more. We have just 2 more little
Bette Midler has
things.
gone down on more than that. Don't you worry about that.
Well, this is why. That's artificial intelligence. That's the real intelligence. That's a way better joke. Okay, we have just. Oh,
I have to tell you.
Yeah.
Bette Midler, when she closed at the baths, this is decades ago. I got a call to go and follow her at the baths. Now, I'm brave. So I got 2 boys from the chorus, and I put a little act together to do at the baths. And we go there at the Continental Baths, and my opening number was, boom, 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 splish, splash, I was taking a bath. Long about a Saturday night, woo, woo, just relaxing at the tubs, thinking everything was all right. And I came out, and I thought we were still on. We were going to be so funny. And these guys are sitting there with their genitals hanging out and walking around naked, and they're looking at us. We're going, splish, splash. Bombed. I thought it was so funny, a parody about the
Did Bette
bath.
think it was funny?
She wasn't there.
Oh, she wasn't?
No, she had finished her gig.
Oh, boy.
They like women doing all that stuff.
Sure.
Oh, I bombed.
We meant to ask you this in the first. Christian brought it to my attention. What was the first Broadway show that you saw?
Carnival.
Carnival.
Gower Champion.
Wow.
Jerry Orbach, Anna Marie Abreggetti, Kay Ballard. Kay Ballard and Jerry Orbach became lifelong, very, very close friends of mine.
Wow.
I
Look
mean,
at that.
they were, I thank you, God, for that experience.
Yeah.
And I loved the show. I thought it was exquisitely done, Gower Champion.
Yeah.
An empty stage, they come out and they build the set all before your eyes.
Oh, man.
Gower had this cinematic thing. He could change scenes with people singing the song, the next person starts it all, and then you're into the next scene. He was just a genius at doing that. No one could stage a show better than Gower Champion.
Brilliant.
As an acting director, but I mean, listen, you hire the right people, you don't have to do that.
Sure.
So, and he certainly had that with us.
Yeah.
Jerry didn't have to be told, neither did Carol Cook or me.
Yeah. Brilliant. And we have just 2 more questions. We're big on manifestation on this podcast. We want to manifest a dream guest. To be quite frank with you, you're a dream guest in and of itself. But manifest a dream guest for us, someone to be sitting in this chair.
Well, there are 2 people that I regret I've never had the chance of working with, who I love and adore. Bernadette Peters and Sandy Duncan.
Oh, we'll take either one.
I wanted to work with either one of them for the experience. Now, I know them socially.
Yeah.
But never as you know.
Yeah, I'll take it. That's great. That's a great answer. My goodness.
And also I always wanted to work with Stephen Sondheim and Hal Prince, but that never happened.
Yeah, right.
And the only Stephen Sondheim show that I ever did was Company.
Oh, you did do Company.
Yeah, because there's other shows.
Oh, didn't you do that? You did the Philharmonic one, right? The one.
No, honey. I did it at the prestigious Darien Dinner Theater.
Oh! I don't know why I was getting confused. I think.
But
who did you play?
It's a good story.
Oh, you were Bobby.
I played Bobby. Now I'll tell you a good story about that. This isn't my act too. I'm doing my act tonight. You don't have to come now. You've seen it all.
No, we're coming. We're coming anyway. And so are all of you.
Company I saw opening night. Pam Myers,
yeah,
CCM, first musical theater graduate in the history of America, and stopped the show. I cried. Donna McKechnie, my dancing buddy, not only stopped the show that night, they couldn't start it in the next scene. She was so brilliant. And after the show, I was just overwhelmed. I loved it so much. I went out and immediately bought the album. Yeah. No DVDs or CDs back then. So I bought the album, and I loved the show. Yeah. And before I started 42nd Street, Dennis Cole, a buddy of mine who operated the Darien Dinner Theater, called and said, I want to do Company, will you play Bobby? And I said, absolutely. Yeah. And I met with Robert Johansson, the director, and Jim Coleman, the conductor. And I said, I want to have a conversation with you about how I'm going to play this part, but not to be said to anyone else and no one in the cast. I know who this character is. Because I eventually married him, my partner Bob, who I was with for 50 years. These men who, had girlfriends and led for straight lives and worked in business where they had to be, and liked women and adored women. I love women. I'm comfortable. Sure. I come from, I was, a mama's boy and my sisters, and I'm very comfortable with women. I love women. Yeah. I'm very, very comfortable with women. And he kept all of his friends separated, and he liked married couples because he didn't have to worry about fucking the woman. And then once in a while, for show in his ego, he could do a mercy fuck, and but not make a commitment. That's why with the flight attendant, stewardess, as we called them back then, they have sex, and he's good enough, got a big enough ear to get through it. But then he wants her to feel good, I'll stay, knowing she can't.
Right.
And she says, okay, I'll
This is
stay. And he goes,
Barcelona.
oh God. So I said, I know what this is. And that's what it's not that he can't make a commitment. He can't make a commitment to a woman. That's it. I said,
That's
now,
interesting.
you're not going to change any words, none of the thing. Except Bobby, I said, Robert Johansson, Bobby, I said, in the scenes, you've got to see me watching these people wanting, why can't I be like that? Why can't I feel you're always sorry, you're always grateful. I'm listening to him. Why can't I feel like he does? What's the secret? Why can't I be this? Why can't I do this? That's the way I want to play it.
Yeah.
Now, what happens at the last scene with Joanne, what he likes about Joanne is they get drunk.
Yeah.
And they go out, and this night they get just a little too drunk, and he likes her sarcastic sense of humor. And that's kind of a gay thing, you know. And they're having fun, and they're a little too drunk, and she finally realizes that it's not that he can't make a commitment, he can't make a commitment to a woman because he's gay. And Bobby, I don't want you to be a sarcastic old man. I want you to find love and be who you are. In her mind, and not to discuss it with the actress.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to make you face it. So when are we going to make it? Now I'm drunk. Oh, you're at. I don't know. When are we going to make it?
Mm-hmm.
And in my drunkenness, I threw over the table and left. And in my mind, I went to Central Park. And I looked up to God. And when I sang Somebody Hold Me Too Close, I was saying some man hold me too close. Some man hurt me too deep. And I wanted to go there and sing it drunk. And, I want to be alive. Make me alive. Make me confused. Mock me with praise. Let me be used vary my days. Because alone is alone, not alive. Not alive. And if I had my way as a director, after I finished the song, and they did the Bobby, that thing is to have one man walk across stage I've never seen before, have me leave the stage, have him pass me, and then I look back at him, and he stops and looks back at me, blackout.
Oh, wow. Oh, I love it.
Now they wouldn't go that way.
Sure.
But at least me as the actor, now I never changed a line of dialogue.
Right.
I didn't look at the male members as if nothing. It was just the females and me with what I was going through.
Right. Oh gosh, that's so interesting. I love
That's
that.
what makes good performances.
Yeah, right.
Well,
exactly.
and then Jim Coleman cried every night, who's a gay man. And he said, Leroy, I am so overwhelmed by what you do every night, the catharsis you go through.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I've got to get Stephen to come out here and see you. He never came.
Oh, that's a shame. Talk to me a little bit about you're on the nominating committee of the Cheetah Rivera Awards. We talked about that, and the awards are coming up. And I guess I just want to know a little bit about state of the industry stuff. We talked about it a little bit off camera, but some of your favorite things that you've seen this year and what you see going on Broadway that you love, and also things that you would like to change. And it doesn't have to be specific shows, but more the essences of what's going on.
Well, you must remember I'm 82 years old. So, everybody has what they do in their lives, like people who loved operetta, and suddenly musical comedy came along. So you're geared to what you like. And growing up, as I said earlier, I should have grown up in the 50s loving Elvis Presley and doing all of that, but I didn't. And I didn't love country western music, which were my roots.
Yeah.
But I went to the movie theater in Covington because, as I said, when we went out, getting a hamburger and a bowl of chili was really a big deal, or going to the movies.
Right.
Going to the movies, I saw a comedy, not very good, with Clark Gable, Lily Palmer, and Carol Baker called But Not For Me. A stupid movie. I shouldn't say that, but it wasn't, kind of silly. And so at the end of the piece, this woman is singing, they're writing songs of love, but not for me. And I'm going, that voice. And I see, but not for me, George Ira Gershwin, Ella Fitzgerald, Verve Records. So I went to the record store and I said, I want to buy the record, but not for me, sung by Ella Fitzgerald. I said, well, it's not on a single. It's on an album. Ella Fitzgerald sings Gershwin Volume 1. I saved up my pennies till I could buy it, and I wore it out. That was my first connection with a composer, lyricist, and a singer.
Right.
that's my music, the Great American Songbook.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I live. So coming into your question,
Yeah.
that's where I live. Now I'm faced with rock, with rap, with all this other stuff that's happened. Now I'm going to the theater and it's transitioning into that.
Yeah.
And yes, I saw Hamilton. 15 minutes, I thought, well, and it was hard adjusting to who was playing what.
Sure.
With all of the diversity and also understanding what they were saying.
Yeah.
I could certainly understand that it was brilliant.
Sure.
And it was done very well. And so I'm at a disadvantage that way. But now currently what is happening, but then, now, last year I went to see Merrily We Roll Along.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, they've been trying to do that turkey, how many, everybody doing it, this and that. So I went and went, oh, now show me. Well, I just loved it.
Yeah, me too.
I fell madly in love with Jonathan Groff.
Yes.
The director did a beautiful job.
Yeah, Maria.
I loved it.
Yeah.
That was my big show last year.
Right. Right.
So now this year, I go off. Last year, that by the way, I went to see Buena Vista Social Club at the.
Oh, you saw it at Atlantic.
Yeah.
Oh.
Loved it.
I tried so hard to get tickets to that. It was
Loved
impossible, but.
And I thought, why is it this show on Broadway?
Right. Right.
And of course, now seeing it on Broadway, I like it even better.
Yeah.
They've enlarged and suddenly the dancing, whether it's the same show or whether they've enhanced, I don't know what they did, I didn't know it well enough, but I love it.
Yeah.
Buena Vista Social Club, the performances, I like what it has to say about our history,
Right.
and the music is just, I wanted to get up and dance in the aisles.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just adored it.
Yeah.
And
And you mentioned we just saw Groff in Just in Time as well,
Well,
with our dearest Michelle
and
Park.
I went into that. I know Bobby Darin. Honey, I
course.
grew up in that period.
Right, of
Sandra Dee
course.
and all that stuff. Of course, I'm madly in love with Jonathan Groff. But I thought, well, and I liked the set before it started, and he came out. I loved the concept.
Yeah.
I loved the performances. Michelle Park, my CCM friend, was brilliant. I just loved it.
Yeah.
And
too.
it was beautifully done.
Me too.
And,
Yeah, love that. We have one last question. We have taken up so much of your time. This is certainly our longest episode, and we have loved it, and I'm
And
sure
we've
everyone
just
listening
begun.
has too. Yeah, right. When we started the podcast, we asked you who your I Want to Be Like You as a kid was, and I want to ask you, who is your I Want to Be Like You now? And it doesn't have to be a celebrity. It doesn't have to be. It could be someone in your family. It could be whoever you like.
Who would I like to be now? Oh my God, that's too hard of a question. I can't think of anyone to associate with because I associate with the past. But
Sure.
I know as far as the future, people that I admired, in our history, Abraham Lincoln. To come from Kentucky as did I, and what he did with our country during that terrible time. That's why I went to see. When I went to see Old Mary, I had a hard time because watching Abraham Lincoln get a blowjob was not funny to me. And I'm
Sure.
sorry. I know everyone
I haven't seen
laughed
it.
about it.
Sure.
But that was, a great man in our time who did so much. And, people like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was not a perfect man. But what they did for our country and their commitment to making things for all people.
Right.
I think those are the people I admire and respect. To think of anyone in show business that I would be like, I don't compete. I don't compete, I create.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to be like anybody else. I just want to be me.
Yeah.
I gotta be me.
I love that.
We could fade out and I could sing I Am What I Am and we'll have, but that's really
I
where
love that
am.
answer.
I feel that we are all special individuals with our own tools, and it's just finding the people who can appreciate it and have you do more of it.
Yeah.
It's like trying to find a child. Don't turn them into what you want them to be. Find out what they like to do.
Right.
You can be a king and not be happy. You can be a pauper, or you can be happy as It just has to do with what you love doing.
Yeah.
You can have a fancy house or a tent, as long as you're happy with the people and that you learn to love and respect one another for their differences as well for what you have in common. And what's happening in our world now with the president is disgusting. How that happened in this country, but it's democracy. And not everybody is always right. And it remains to be seen what it's going to be like, but it frightens me. It frightens me. Why is it so difficult? Why can't we try to make it good for everybody? Why isn't the emphasis on the young, making education paramount in everything that we do, and healthcare? That everybody should have access to doctors and be able to take care of themselves and learn how to be healthy. And we help people. That's what it is, health and education. And taking away programs and taking away the arts, which are for our souls, and trying to turn people into these robots and these rich people who are making so much money who can't share what they have for the betterment of the people who don't. And and also to admire the people who came from nothing and built something of themselves, and just with that commitment. And why can't we have more of that? So I like those kinds of people. So I mean, that's kind of a broad spectrum.
No, I do love that answer, and I think that's
I can't be specific, but those kind
that's
of
perfect.
People. And for people to be happy. I just want them to be happy, and don't make fun of people. I mean, only unless you're having fun and they're having fun with you.
Right.
It's a difference.
Thank you so much for doing this. I cannot thank you enough for your time. This was amazing. It was brilliant.
And please nobody sue me. I don't have any money. You can't get anything.
And go see his show at 54
Yes.
Below. Thank you, Leroy. Woo, woo, woo. I Want to Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes is produced by Elbi and Christian Cespedes. Special thanks to Angelina Cespedes, Kirsten Blue Kaiser, Vincenzo Salvatore Cakes, and of course, Leroy Reams.